Chapter 215. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect's fast sword arts were famed in the world. Ba Mountain Night Rain, Purple Lightning, and Thunder. This 8-character sword art had offense and defense, internal and external. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect disciples who cultivated multiple sword arts were even more powerful. Xiao Ting had been an outstanding disciple of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect in the past. He had cultivated the Ba Mountain Sword Manual, the Purple Lightning Azure Light Sword, and the Floating Rain Sword Art. He raised his hand and brandished his sword. In an instant, the sky was filled with faint purple sword shadows that slashed towards Chu Xiu. As the sword shadows fluttered in the air, every one of them seemed to be real. They carried an extremely powerful aura and were extremely fast. Their might was also extremely powerful. The people on the 5th level shook their heads. Mr. Zhao's sword was even faster. If he had not been expelled by the Ba Mountain Sword Sect in the past, with his present strength, he would definitely be heavily nurtured by the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Xiao Ting's sword was indeed very fast. The Ba Mountain Sword Manual focused on sword energy, the Purple Lightning Azure Light Sword focused on speed and power, and the Floating Rain Sword focused on powerful sword presence. Right now, Xiao Ting had merged these 3 sword moves into one. His power, speed, and presence were almost invulnerable. There were very few martial artists of the same level who could last 15 minutes under such a powerful attack. Pity, there was nothing in this world that was truly invulnerable. Xiao Ting's sword was fast and powerful. It was actually very simple to defeat him. That was to be faster than his sword, and stronger than him. The moment the sword energy neared him, Chu Xiu also slashed down with his blade. In a flash, the crimson blood shadow dyed the entire 5th level of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, causing everyone's expressions to change. The blood-refined divine wind exploded with the blade shadows. The bright blade energies were like the light rain falling at dusk, beautiful with dazzling murderous intent. The basic blade skills that Chu Xiu cultivated were the Azure Dragon in the sleeve and the red sleeve blade of the Dusk Drizzle. Each of them were powerful and fast blade skills, far faster than Xiao Ting. Most importantly, Chu Xiu was stronger than Xiao Ting. The Ba Mountain Sword Manual of the Ba Mountain Sword Sect was a supplementary sword method that could condense sword energy into a more solid state. But the Ba Mountain Sword Sect was not famous in terms of internal strength. In terms of pure power, how could it compare to Chu Xiu's blood-refined divine shield and the great primordial chaos art? In an instant, the crimson saber shadows that filled the sky completely submerged Xiao Ting's sword momentum. Xiao Ting was still resisting the saber shadows bitterly, but at this moment, he was sweating profusely. He couldn't resist this kind of absolute power unless he used the killer moves that he used when he risked his life. After a few dozen breaths, a clanging sound could be heard. Xiao Ting's sword was sent flying. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Many of the people on the 5th floor were locals of Eastern Qi. They were also old customers of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. They knew Xiao Ting's strength. Most of them had even fought with Xiao Ting before and knew the terror of his fast sword. But now, Xiao Ting was defeated in the same way in the area that he was best at. When did the Guanzhong torture room have such a young expert? Xiao Ting saluted Chu Xiu bitterly and said, "Young Master Chu, I have lost. You can ascend to the 6th floor. With your strength, it shouldn't be difficult for you to ascend to the 7th floor." As the gatekeeper of the 6th floor, Xiao Ting had been defeated before. It was just that he had never been defeated so badly. He had always been proud of his fast sword skills. But today, he was defeated in the area that he was best at. This was a heavy blow to him. The waiter was stunned. He immediately called for another waiter on the 5th floor and asked him to pass the news of Chu Xiu to the prince on the 7th floor. Previously, when Chu Xiu used his aura to suppress Cha Kuei, it was shocking. However, it was impossible to see Chu Xiu's strength. But now, Chu Xiu used his fast sword skills to defeat Xiao Ting in a few dozen breaths. This strength was shocking enough. In addition, Chu Xiu came from the Guanzhong torture room. With the status of the prince, they had to make friends with him. The waiter nodded and immediately ascended to the 7th floor. At that moment, there were only a few dozen people on the 7th floor. Not even half of the seats were filled. This was the rule of the Julong court. Only those with strength and status could step onto the 7th floor. Otherwise, even if the seats were empty, they would not let anyone take them. The dozens of people on the 7th floor were divided into 3 groups. The largest group was the local warriors of Eastern Qi. The God Weapon Conference was held in Eastern Qi. Of course, these people were the most complete. The second group was the Northern Yan and West Chu warriors. After all, they were all from the same country, so they knew each other. Therefore, they found a group of people to chat with. Among the Northern Yan group, there was one person that Chu Xiao was familiar with. He was the number 1 of the younger generation in the Floating Snow City, Blood Spear, by Wuji. Among the people on the 7th floor, the Northern Yan had the least people. There were less than 10 of them. One of them was a young man in a blue robe, with a jade-like face. He looked at Bai Wuji and asked, "Brother Bai, why are there so few people from the Northern Yan in this divine weapon conference? Not to mention Eastern Qi, they can't even compare with West Chu. When the God Weapon Conference starts, I'm afraid we will suffer. At that time, we will lose face for the entire Northern Yan. If only the Wisdom King, Zongxian from the Great Guangming Temple was here. He is a powerhouse ranked 2nd on the Longhu list. If the Little Celestial Master, Zhang Qingjin doesn't come, who can beat him?" The person who spoke was Fang Huai, an outstanding disciple of the Fang family in the south of Yen. The Fang family was second only to the Xinwu sect in the south of Yen. Although there was no real pellet state martial arts grand master in the family, there was still a great master in the unity of man and nature realm. With Bai Wuji's identity and status, he naturally didn't need to break through layer by layer. Fang Huai was considered a figure in the south of Yen, but in the Eastern Qi, he could only be said to be a nobody. Therefore, he also broke through layer by layer. Although the process was difficult, it also proved that Fang Huai was not that kind of mediocre person. Bai Wuji sneered and said, "I say, you people are just worrying about nothing. It's fine if the monsters in the top 5 of the Longhu list don't come. If they really come, this God Weapon Conference doesn't need to compete anymore. We can just watch the show. The monks of the Great Guangming Temple are cultivating the Vajradhyana behind closed doors. The disciples won't come out easily, so Zongxian won't come. If Zongxian doesn't come, Zhang Qingjin won't come, and the sword chief, Fang Qi Shao won't come either." To put it arrogantly, they couldn't bear to look at a divine weapon. It was said that the inherited divine weapon of Sword King City, the startling salamander ranked 21st in the sword book, was prepared for 7th young Master Fang. Without the attraction of the god weapon, these guys can fight whenever they want. Why bother to fight in the ring and let people watch for free? Fang Huai nodded in understanding. After all, the realm was different. The existence in the top 5 of the Longhu list, their realm and vision were no longer something that Fang Huai and the others could easily figure out. For a martial artist at Fang Huai's level, being able to make a name for himself in front of thousands of Jianghu elites was already what he wanted. For those in the top 5 of the Longhu list, fame was no longer something they pursued because they were already famous in the Jianghu. At this time, someone next to him asked, "Right, where is young Master Nya of the Morgue village?" Young Master Nya shouldn't be absent from such an event. Moreover, young Master Nya is ranked 6th on the Longhu list. His presence can also boost the morale of the Northern Yen. As soon as this was said, everyone present looked at the guy who spoke as if he was an idiot. Was this guy's EQ low, or was he really an idiot? The martial artists of Northern Yen origin all knew that Bai Wuji and Nye Donglu had a grudge. Now that Bai Wuji was here, but this guy said that it was a pity that Nye Donglu wasn't here. Did he mean that Bai Wuji couldn't represent the martial artists of Northern Yen and was inferior to Nye Donglu? Sure enough, as soon as the martial artist said this, Bai Wuji's face turned gloomy. However, this was Eastern Qi, the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. There were martial artists from other sects here, so Bai Wuji didn't lose his temper. He only sneered and said, "Nye Donglu can't come. He is in seclusion at the Morgue village. Don't you guys know how he got his 6th place on the Longhu list? He schemed and schemed to get to this position, but the top 5 of the Longhu list is not something that can be achieved with just scheming. Moreover, the cultivation of this generation of people on the Longhu list is gradually catching up. When everyone else reaches the 3-flower realm, will he still have the nerve to occupy the 6th place on the Longhu list? As he said this, Bai Wuji suddenly sneered again and said, also, I think Nie Donglu is too ashamed to come here. You guys might not know this, but Nie Donglu was defeated by a woman. TSK, he was humiliated by a woman and lost miserably. Just thinking about his expression at the time, I can laugh at him for a year. As soon as they heard this, everyone became interested and asked, a woman? Who is it? At this time, Bai Wuji suddenly kept them in suspense. I won't spread this gossip. It's meaningless. You guys will know when you go back to Yendong and ask around. By the way, Fang Huai, you are in Yannan. Do you know who the Divine Force sect sent? Also, Yan Shi is in Huangfu clan, and your Fang clan is also quite close to the Huangfu clan. Haven't you heard anything? Fang Huai shook his head and said, I don't know about the Huangfu clan. They are a big clan with thousands of years of inheritance, so they naturally don't want to deal with a small family like us. The Divine Force sect probably won't send anyone here. This generation of the Divine Force sect doesn't even have a martial artist on the Longhu list. After all, the history of the Divine Force sect is too short. Although the Yan clan master of Yan Huainan is very powerful and is an overlord, there are no outstanding people in the entire Divine Force sect. They will only come to watch the show. Bai Wuji nodded. While everyone was chatting, they saw a servant rush up and say loudly, My lord, a young talent came to the Guanzhong torture room. He directly forced Cha Kuei to admit defeat with his aura. In a few dozen breaths, he defeated Mr. Xiao Ting with a swift blade against a swift sword. Chapter 2:16. The attendant's shout immediately attracted the attention of the young talents on the 7th floor. Amongst the people present, there were quite a few who were ranked on the Longhu leaderboard. Even if some of them weren't ranked on the Longhu leaderboard, they were figures with decent strength in the younger generation like Fang Huai. Chu Xiu's battle accomplishments didn't attract too much of their attention, and it only caused them to be slightly surprised. What really attracted their attention was Chu Xiu's identity as a member of the Guanzhong torture room. The Guanzhong torture room was in existence between the imperial court and the pugilistic world. However, because they didn't interfere with the affairs of the pugilistic world, the people present didn't have a good impression of the Guanzhong torture room, but they didn't have a bad impression either. It could only be said that their impression was very vague. In the past, the Guanzhong torture room kept a very low profile and almost never left Guanzhong. However, now the Guanzhong torture room had sent someone to participate in the God Weapon Conference. Did this mean that the Guanzhong torture room was also ready to interfere with the affairs of the pugilistic world? Moreover, the people present were also very curious about who the Guanzhong torture room had sent. They had never heard of any outstanding young talents from the Guanzhong torture room. At this time, 2 people walked down from the 8th floor of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion. One of them was in his 40s and wore a purple official robe. His face was square and imposing and he didn't look like an ordinary person. This person was Prince Anil, Jiang Wenyuan. The person beside Jiang Wenyuan was an ordinary middle-aged man in a black robe. His appearance was ordinary, and his aura was restrained to the extreme. Bystanders would not be able to see anything wrong with him. He was definitely the kind of person that would be hard to find in a crowd. However, since he could sit on the 8th floor and was personally received by Jiang Wenyuan, one could imagine what kind of status this person had. Walking down the stairs, the young talents present all stood up and saluted Jiang Wenyuan, Your Highness. The previous generation of the imperial family, the Prince of Eastern Qi, and Jiang Wenyuan already had so many martial artists under him. Although the forces behind these young talents were also very strong, they still had to salute in front of Jiang Wenyuan respectfully. Jiang Wenyuan greeted the crowd amiably, but he scolded the attendant with a gloomy face. Why are you making a fuss? Have you forgotten the rules? The attendant quickly lowered his head and said, Please forgive me, Your Highness. Young Master Chu from the Guanzhong torture room is currently challenging the 7th floor. Should we allow him to skip this step and come up directly? The gatekeeper of the 7th floor was a little strong. The other 2 floors were guarded by the king and Lu estate's hanger-ons, but the gatekeeper of the 7th floor was a consecrator of the king and Lu estate. The former were essentially Jiang Wenyuan's subordinates, making a living under him. On the other hand, the latter was invited by Jiang Wenyuan, so Jiang Wenyuan had to treat him respectfully, fearing that he would leave. By arranging such a person on the 7th floor, if the person who came was someone from a force that was hostile to Jiang Wenyuan, he would directly order the other party to deal with him ruthlessly. If it was an ordinary guest, then he would just probe them normally. Moreover, if the person who came was someone that Jiang Wenyuan thought was valuable, he would personally go down to the 7th level and invite the person up. There was no need for him to challenge the level. This would also indirectly give the other party face and gain their favor. Bai Wuji was like this, he didn't even attempt to challenge a single level. His identity as someone from the drifting snow city was already sufficient, but the moment he arrived at the 1st level, he was recognized by someone and directly informed Jiang Wenyuan to invite him up. As for Fang Huai, he came together with Bai Wuji, so Jiang Wenyuan didn't make things difficult for him. He instructed the hanger-ons and hanger-ons to show some mercy, causing Fang Huai to expend some energy, but he still successfully stepped into the 7th floor. Hearing the attendant's question, Jiang Wenyuan thought about it and said, "There's no need, let him pass the 7th floor and come up himself." A look of astonishment flashed in the eyes of the attendant. An outstanding cultivator from the Guanzhong torture room was also so strong, yet His Highness actually didn't invite him? This wasn't His Highness's character. Although he said this, the attendant still obediently left, not daring to ask any more questions. The middle-aged man beside Jiang Wenyuan suddenly spoke in a strange, deep voice. In the past few decades, the Guanzhong torture room rarely stepped foot in the martial world. Normally, Your Highness couldn't even rope them in even if you wanted to. Now that the Guanzhong torture room finally sent someone out, why didn't Your Highness try to rope them in? Jiang Wenyuan said indifferently, "Rope them in? Why didn't I rope them in?" In the past, when Guan Siyu revived the Guanzhong torture room, he often came to the 3 kingdoms to seek an audience with the various rulers, all for the sake of getting the 3 kingdoms to acknowledge the status of the Guanzhong torture room. At that time, I tried to rope Guan Siyu in. I could give him money to help him stabilize the internal affairs of the Guanzhong torture room, and I could also use my status in the Qi kingdom to put in a good word for him. In the end, that idiot Guan Siyu rejected me without even thinking and even said that I had the ambition of a wolf. He simply didn't want the face I gave him. At this point, Jiang Wenyuan's expression had already turned somewhat ugly. In the past, he was also young and impetuous. When he saw that Guan Siyu had come to the Qi kingdom to ask for help, he began to persuade and tempt him. He wanted Guan Siyu and even the entire Guanzhong torture room to side with him. In the end, he was humiliated by Guan Siyu. This was something that Jiang Wenyuan would never forget for the rest of his life. Now that a junior from the Guanzhong torture room had come to the Qi kingdom, it was already very magnanimous of him not to cause trouble in secret. What kind of joke was he trying to rope him in? Based on Guan Siyu's stubborn attitude, no one could think of roping in the people from the Guanzhong torture room. The middle-aged man next to Jiang Wenyuan couldn't help but laugh coldly when he saw Jiang Wenyuan's expression. This King Anil of Eastern Qi really had great ambitions but little talent. He looked magnanimous, but in reality, he didn't have the slightest tolerance for others. When did Guan Siyu come to the Qi kingdom to discuss the status of the Guanzhong torture room? It was more than 20 years ago. Guan Siyu had already successfully taken over the position of Hall Master. She was also a Grand Master who had condensed the martial path true core. As the Hall Master of the Guanzhong torture room, she was also an overlord. What about Jiang Wenyuan back then? He had just taken over the position of Prince of Ease. He was just a young man who only knew how to talk and seemed ambitious. Did such a person deserve to rope in Guan Siyu? He also wanted the Guanzhong torture room to side with him. He was simply overestimating himself. Not to mention Guan Siyu, any normal person would not agree to it. However, at the moment, he was still working with Jianghu. Therefore, the middle-aged man only chuckled and said, "It was a pity that Guanxiu rejected you back then. Otherwise, the Guanzhong torture room wouldn't have been quiet for so long. Now, it has finally stabilized and begun to set foot in the underworld." Jiang Wenyuan snorted lightly and said, "I want to see what kind of people Guanxiu has cultivated over the years. Can they compare with the talents of the Qi kingdom? I didn't instruct Uncle Qi to be merciful. If the martial artist from the Guanzhong torture room can't pass Uncle Qi, then it can only be said that he is not strong enough." The middle-aged man couldn't help but shake his head. Jiang Wenyuan is really narrow-minded. Under normal circumstances, Jiang Wenyuan's elder, Uncle Qi, would be merciful to the young talents who came to challenge the level. However, if he went all out, even some of the talents in the top 20 of the Longhu list might not be able to resist him. This was because Uncle Qi was a great master in the unity of man and nature realm at his peak. However, he fell to the physical invulnerability realm because he encountered some problems when trying to break through to the martial path real core realm. At this time, at the entrance of the 7th floor, Chu Xiu also saw the gatekeeper of the last floor. It was somewhat beyond his expectations. It turned out to be an old man with snow-white hair and a face full of wrinkles. He sat there with his eyes slightly closed as if he was about to enter the grave. At this time, when he saw the attendant bring Chu Xiu over, Uncle Qi opened his eyes and muttered, "Someone came to challenge the 7th floor again? Seriously, this god weapon conference has caused this old man so much trouble. Your Highness should be more magnanimous and directly invite all these young people up. Why do you have to compete with an old man like me?" As he spoke, Uncle Qi slowly sat up from his small stool. At this time, the attendant upstairs also came down. Uncle Qi glanced at the attendant and revealed a questioning look. However, the attendant shook his head, indicating that Uncle Qi didn't need to go easy. This made Uncle Qi very surprised. He knew his master's personality. If a martial artist that could reach the 7th floor was too old, then so be it. But generally speaking, a young martial artist's potential should be quite good, and it would be worth his master roping him in. Why was his master telling him not to go easy on him? Wasn't this the same as driving away a young talent? However, Uncle Qi didn't think too much about it. He was getting old, and it was tiring to think too much. Anyway, he was indebted to His Highness. Since he was allowed to retire here, he would do whatever His Highness said. Hence, Uncle Qi directly said to Chu Xiu, "Young man, my rules are very simple. I will only attack for 100 breaths of time. If you can persist for 100 breaths of time without losing, then you can ascend to the 7th floor." In the eyes of others, 100 breaths of time was very short. In the time it took to say a few words, it would already be 100 breaths of time. However, to martial artists, those who were faster could exchange dozens of moves within 100 breaths of time. Just like when Chu Xiu was fighting with Shao Ting, he could slash out hundreds of sword chi and saber shadows in an instant. His speed was simply astonishing. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "If it's just not losing, then it is indeed very simple." Uncle Qi grinned. Although he was frighteningly old, his teeth were like those of a young man. They were neat and snow-white, without any missing parts. It is a good thing for young people to be impetuous. However, since this old man was arranged by his lord to guard the 7th floor, he must have some ability. "Young man, be careful." As his voice fell, Uncle Qi directly took a step forward and punched out at the same time. Just this step was like a qilin shaking the ground, causing the entire hall of the 7th floor to tremble. As this punch landed, it also brought with it the roar of a dragon and the roar of a tiger. The astral energy turned into a storm that swept out with unparalleled power. Before he attacked, Uncle Qi was just an old man with one foot in the grave. However, when he attacked, this old man who was about to die seemed to have transformed into a terrifying demon god. Chapter 217. Uncle Qi was a skinny old man who looked like he was on the brink of death. For him to suddenly unleash such a level of power was very terrifying. Even Chu Xiu did not expect this. When this punch landed, it even gave Chu Xiu a great deal of pressure. Most importantly, Chu Xiu felt a trace of aura from Uncle Chi's body. It was an aura that definitely did not belong to a physical invulnerability realm martial artist. Chu Xiu had seen many experts in the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, he had even fought with the Heavenly Sin branch leader before. He was very sensitive to the aura of experts in this realm. Experts in this realm were strong because they had already reached a level where they could comprehend the heavens and earth. Their essence, qi, and spirit would condense and fuse with the heavens and earth. When they attacked, their strength would integrate with the surrounding environment. Although they could not reach the level of borrowing the power of the heavens and earth, they could borrow the power of the heavens and earth. Right now, Uncle Chi gave Chu Xiu this feeling. Under this punch, it was vast and majestic. It was as though the entire heavens and earth had merged into his fist. He was clearly a physical invulnerability realm martial artist, but when he attacked, he had the aura of an expert in the unity of heaven and man realm. This was really strange. However, at this time, Chu Xiu did not care about whether it was strange or not. On the contrary, a hint of fighting spirit surged in his body. Only when there was pressure would there be motivation. In the past, Chu Xiu's opponents were too weak. Almost no one could give Chu Xiu pressure. In the Guangzhong torture room, it was difficult for martial artists of the same level to make a difference. Even when he faced Lin Kaiyun, who was also on the Longhu list, Chu Xiu could still crush him. But now, this Uncle Chi in front of Chu Xiu was strong enough. He was strong enough to make Chu Xiu feel heavy pressure. With a loud explosion, Chu Xiu circulated the great primordial chaos art of heaven and earth to the extreme. His aura was majestic and vast, like the beginning of the primordial chaos, incomparably powerful. At that moment, the powerful foundation that Chu Xiu displayed shocked even Uncle Chi. This kind of powerful inner force foundation had already surpassed 99% of the physical invulnerability realm martial artists. Even some of the three-flower realm martial artists couldn't compare to Chu Xiu. Facing Uncle Chi's punch, Chu Xiu's hands formed the great Vajra will seal. In an instant, a blinding Buddhist light bloomed. The Vajra suppressed the world, destroying all evil and subduing demons. The incomparably ferocious great Vajra will seal collided with Uncle Chi's fist that carried the roar of a tiger and the roar of a dragon. In an instant, the entire dragon assembling pavilion seemed to shake, emitting a violent explosion of astral energy. This vibration was not only felt by the 6th floor, but even the 7th floor could feel it. Jiang Wenyuan's expression changed slightly. Although his strength was very weak, he had many experts under him, so he had good eyesight. According to his expectations, Uncle Chi should have completely crushed the young man from the Guangzhong torture room. In the end, it caused a vibration of this level. What did this mean? It meant that both sides were evenly matched. The middle-aged man beside Jiang Wenyuan chuckled and said, "Your Highness, it seems that the person sent by the Guangzhong torture room is not ordinary. Do you regret not recruiting him? If you can recruit such a talent, even if he has to leave the Guangzhong torture room, as long as he himself is able to do so, it will be worth it." Jiang Wenyuan snorted coldly and said, "Whose side are you on? I know Uncle Chi's strength. How many of the younger generation can beat him? Perhaps this junior from the Guangzhong torture room is proficient in martial arts with explosive power, which is why he can barely exchange a blow with Uncle Chi." As Jiang Wenyuan spoke, intense explosions of astral energy came from below, one after another. It shook the entire dragon assembling pavilion to the point that they no longer had the mood to eat. All of them looked up with astonishment. The black-clothed middle-aged man looked at Jiang Wenyuan with an expression that was not a smile. His words had just been refuted by the facts. This was really a slap in the face. And at this moment, Uncle Chi's expression was also very grave. Just now, when Chu Xiu used the great Vajra will seal to clash with his fist, the result was that he had the upper hand. He did not take a step back, but Chu Xiu had taken 3 steps back. Even so, he was still astonished by Chu Xiu's strength. At this moment, Chu Xiu, who had taken 3 steps back, seemed to not feel anything. Immediately after, he pressed forward again. Palm techniques like the Great Vajra will seal and the Great Violet Sun hand of extinguishing the heavens and extinguishing the earth were blasted out one after another. He actually fought Uncle Chi to a stalemate. This caused Uncle Chi to be shocked. Where did this monster come from? Not only was Chu Xiu's Great Vajra will seal powerful, but the Great Violet Sun hand of extinguishing the heavens and extinguishing the earth was also incomparably strange. When the purple sun devil flame entered his body, Uncle Chi's own inner strength was strong. He could directly force the purple sun devil flame out, but every time he did so, he would have to expend a portion of his inner strength and energy. In the long run, the amount of inner strength and energy he consumed would increase, and it would be easier for Chu Xiu to take advantage of it. Both sides exchanged dozens of blows. 100 breaths of time had already passed, but no one had any intention of stopping. Uncle Chi was also really angered. He was a senior in the pugilistic world and was a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm in the past. Jianghu had arranged for him to guard the last level here. In fact, most of the time, he was letting the fight go. He would then stand from the perspective of a senior and give pointers to the other party. Those juniors would naturally thank him respectfully. Of course, this was not Uncle Chi taking advantage of his seniority. When he was at his peak, he had already taken half a step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Naturally, he was qualified to give pointers to these junior warriors. In the end, he was evenly matched with a junior warrior like Chu Xiu. This also put Uncle Chi in a difficult position. A solemn look appeared on Uncle Chi's old face. His originally somewhat turbid eyes also revealed a bright sharpness. The earth energy around him condensed in his palms, and he suddenly pushed them forward. In an instant, the earth energy seemed to condense into a huge mountain. It was extremely heavy and majestic. At this moment, Uncle Chi also formed a fist seal with both hands. As the huge mountain of earth energy came crashing down on Chu Xiu, the powerful earth energy and pressure instantly sealed Chu Xiu in this space, making it impossible for him to dodge or hide. Move mountains and fill seas. After all, Uncle Chi was a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm in the past. In terms of the application of power, he far surpassed Chu Xiu. When this mountain-like fist seal landed, it really had the charm of moving mountains and filling seas. It was incomparably majestic, and the powerful pressure stimulated Chu Xiu's fighting spirit to the extreme. Black mist lingered on the red sleeve saber. This was the first time Chu Xiu had used his saber. Previously, he had been using his own fist technique to resist Uncle Chi. It was also somewhat intended to hone his own realm strength. Now that he was facing Uncle Chi's fist seal, Chu Xiu was not confident that he could withstand it if he did not explode with his strongest power. Boundless hatred and death chi coiled around Chu Xiu's saber, Chu Xiu's arm, and even his eyes. The 3 sabers of Avicii suddenly slashed out. It was as if the gates of hell had appeared, and a shocking death chi suddenly erupted. This time, Chu Xiu directly used the second saber of the 3 sabers of Avicii to resist Uncle Chi's attack. After seeing Chu Xiu's saber slash out, everyone present had a look of horror in their eyes. Even a blind person could see that this saber was a standard demonic cultivation method. It was incomparably evil. Even the shocking hatred and death chi could affect them, causing their negative emotions to erupt. This kind of terrifying demonic saber did not seem like something an ordinary person would cultivate. If Chu Xiu had not already made his identity clear, that he was a member of the Guanzhong torture room, it was likely that all the martial artists present would have easily swarmed forward to eliminate the demon and defend justice. At this moment, the moment Chu Xiu slashed out with his saber, the middle-aged man beside Jianghu on the 7th floor also revealed a strange look. He had not seen such a pure and terrifying demonic aura for a long time. Who was this person? Had the Guanzhong torture room already begun to take in demonic cultivators? The 3 sabers of Avicii clashed with Uncle Chi's moving mountains and filling seas. The powerful saber aura contained surging hatred and demonic aura tore through everything. Shattering mountains. Withering seas. Nirvana energy. A look of horror appeared in Uncle Chi's eyes. Golden nirvana energy bloomed between his hands. He formed a swastika seal with his hands and struck out continuously. Only then did he finally counteract the saber aura of Chu Xiu's 3 sabers of Avicii. This Buddhist seal was something he had learned from an old monk from a small temple when he was traveling the pugilistic world when he was young. Its power was limited against ordinary people, but it was very effective against martial artists who cultivated demonic cultivation methods. In the end, when faced with Chu Xiu's 3 sabers of Avicii, he had to use several Buddhist seals to block it. One could imagine how powerful Chu Xiu's saber was. Looking at Chu Xiu, whose eyes were still filled with monstrous demonic aura, Uncle Chi laughed bitterly and said, "Let's not fight anymore. Young master, please head up to the 7th level." Chu Xiu stood on the spot and did not move. He only formed the inner lion seal with his hands and used the power of the 9 words formula to suppress the backlash of the 3 sabers of Avicii. Actually, the outcome of the battle was still undecided. However, Uncle Chi did not wish to continue fighting. He had roamed the pugilistic world all his life. Of course, he still had trump cards in his hands. However, he did not intend to use them now. Since Chu Xiu had come to the Dragon Assembly Pavilion, no matter what his identity was, he was just a guest. To put it bluntly, Uncle Chi was just a doorkeeper. Could he really fight to the death with Chu Xiu here? If he continued fighting and lost or fell into a disadvantageous position, he would lose all his face. At this moment, the other martial artists present were also looking at Chu Xiu in shock. They were considered frequent customers of the Dragon Assembly Pavilion. Naturally, they had seen many people fight with Uncle Chi. Some of them had even tried to go up to the 7th level before. In the end, most of them could not even take 3 moves from Uncle Chi. However, this Chu Xiu before them could fight with Uncle Chi to such a level. He even forced Uncle Chi to take a step back. This kind of strength was definitely something that they could only look up to. The demonic aura in Chu Xiu's eyes dissipated. He squinted at Uncle Chi and said, "Would still like to exchange a few moves with you, old senior." Uncle Chi said indifferently, "I'm already old. I don't have the mood to continue fighting. Those true young elites upstairs should be your opponents, young master." Chapter 218. On the 7th floor of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, everyone was looking at the entrance, wanting to see what kind of person was able to fight evenly with Uncle Chi. Although they didn't go down to watch, just by feeling the shockwaves from the fight, they could imagine the scene. It was absolutely intense. Some of these people had fought with Uncle Chi before. They were not stupid, and they could guess that Uncle Chi had gone easy on them when they fought. Even so, they had used a lot of strength to last for more than 100 breaths. Yet, the person below was able to fight with Uncle Chi to this extent. How strong was he? At this time, at Bai Wuji's table, Fang Hui asked in a low voice, "Brother Bai, if you fought with Uncle Chi, would you be able to fight as well as this person?" Bai Wuji's face was a little uncertain. After a long while, he said, "I haven't fought with Uncle Chi, how can I be sure? Moreover, if we really fight, I can't kill him. I can't use some of the northern floating snow city's secret techniques. If it's not a life and death battle, it's very difficult to determine a winner." Everyone secretly glanced at Bai Wuji. His words didn't seem to match his heart. Even if they hadn't seen pork, they had seen pigs run. The 2 people below didn't fight to the death, didn't they still see their strength? However, none of them had low EQ to expose Bai Wuji. They were all looking down to see who it was that had come down. A moment later, Chu Xiu stepped into the 7th floor, wearing a black robe, black iron hat, and a red saber scabbard hanging on his waist, giving off a very evil feeling. Eastern Qi and West Chu's cultivators looked at each other. Who was this person? He looked unfamiliar. Could it be that this person had been trained by the Guanzhong torture room since he was a child, and had never stepped out into the world? But at this time, Bai Wuji's eyes showed a trace of horror, mixed with a hint of anger. He suddenly stood up, slammed the table, and said coldly, Chu Xiu. It's you. Chu Xiu looked up and saw Bai Wuji. He couldn't help but smile. So it's brother Bai, long time no see, how are you? Bai Wuji stared at Chu Xiu, his eyes showing a complicated look. In fact, there was no direct hatred between him and Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had tricked him during the treasure hunt at Liu Yangshan, but Nie Donglu had also been tricked. Compared to Chu Xiu taking away the treasure, Bai Wuji was more interested in seeing Nie Donglu suffer. And after that, Chu Xiu snatched away the blood jade necklace from the hands of the Drift Snow cities Bai clan and the Morgue village. Bai Wuji had also heard of this, but he didn't feel anything. In any case, Chu Xiu didn't snatch it from his hands. What really made Bai Wuji and Chu Xiu hate each other was the Tiger and Dragon list ranking. It was a small list, but it involved their reputation and face. How many people in the Jianghu could really be indifferent to fame and wealth? On the Tiger and Dragon list, Bai Wuji was ranked 18th. Bai Wuji was quite satisfied with this position. After all, his cultivation was not very high at that time. He was still in the northern Yan martial world. It was not easy for him to fight all the way to his current position. But Chu Xiu obviously didn't fight as many times as him, but Wind's sweeping tower made Chu Xiu take his position. How could Bai Wuji tolerate this? Although the truth was that there was some friction between the floating snow city and Wind's sweeping tower in the northern Yan martial world, Wind's sweeping tower used Chu Xiu's ranking to annoy the floating snow city. But in the eyes of the outside world, it must be that Bai Wuji was inferior to Chu Xiu, which was why he was pushed down from the Tiger and Dragon list. The people in the floating snow city all knew about this, but they didn't say anything. But the discussion of outsiders had made Bai Wuji angry for a long time. Bai Wuji looked at Chu Xiu and sneered, "I'm fine, but I heard that you were chased like a stray dog by my floating snow city. I thought you were dead, but I didn't expect that you're still alive. And from an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society, you became a member of the Guanzhong torture room. Don't tell me you're an imposter?" Hearing Bai Wuji's words, the people at his table finally realized who Chu Xiu was. After all, Chu Xiu was quite famous in the east of Yan. The gold medal assassin of the Blue Dragon Society was cunning and cruel. Especially when he set up a trap to destroy the Yu clan of the Northern Mountain, it made the East Yan pugilistic world recognize the killing methods of the Blue Dragon Society. Not only could they kill with knives, they could also kill with human hearts. But after the incident with the blood jade crystal, Chu Xiu left the East Yan for more than a year. This was too long for the pugilistic world. Even the leader of the Heavenly Sin branch had changed. Naturally, Chu Xiu had been forgotten. Until Bai Wuji said this, they finally realized who Chu Xiu was. It was the same for the others. There were only a few names on the Longhu leaderboard. Thinking of Chu Xiu's name and his background in the Blue Dragon Society, it was easy to guess his identity. Chu Xiu said lightly, "You don't have to worry about whether I'm a fake or not. Oh right, speaking of which, I have to thank the people of the fluttering snow city of the far north. Liu Yangshan's treasures were given to me by you, and the blood jade crystal was given to me by the elders of the Bai clan. Now that I'm ranked 18th on the Longhu leaderboard, it's all thanks to the support and help of the fluttering snow city of the far north." Hearing this, Bai Wuji's face immediately showed a hint of anger. He pointed at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, don't think that just because you're ranked above me, you can really challenge me. Don't think that just because you joined the Guanzhong torture room, you can look down on the fluttering snow city of the far north." Chu Xiu shrugged and said, "Bai Wuji, you know what's going on with the rankings on the Longhu leaderboard. If you're not satisfied, you can go and reason with the Wind Sweeping Tower. If you can make the Wind Sweeping Tower lower their head and put you in the first place, I don't care. People of the pugilistic world fight for fame and fortune. The Wind Sweeping Tower's Longhu leaderboard is just for an idiot like you. Of course, if you really want to compete with me, then I'll accompany you to the end. It just so happens that I haven't had a good fight yet. Why don't we have a round?" The cultivators from the drifting snow city of the extreme north were naturally arrogant and irritable. When he heard Chu Xiu's words, Bai Wuji immediately grabbed the silver spear Chu Xiu had placed beside him and was about to attack. but he was held back by Feng Huai, who was beside him. "Brother Bai. Calm down. This is Eastern Qi, this is the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. The God Weapon Conference hasn't started yet, there's no need to rush." At this time, Jiang Wenyuan also suddenly spoke. "All right, young people have a short temper, it's enough to say a few words. Don't tell me you really want to tear down this prince's Dragon Gatherer Pavilion?" The servant behind Chu Xiu also hurriedly said to Chu Xiu, "Young Master Chu, this is our prince." When Bai Wuji heard Jiang Wenyuan speak, he also didn't want to offend a local tyrant like Jiang Wenyuan, so he could only coldly snort without saying a word. Chu Xiu looked at Jiang Wenyuan with a strange expression, cupped his hands, and said, "Greetings, Prince." At this time, Jiang Wenyuan's expression was no longer as cold as before. He patted Chu Xiu's shoulder and said, "Not bad, there are many people who can pass through the third floor of my Dragon Gatherer Pavilion, but not many can do it to your level. Guan Siyu can be considered very lucky to be able to drag you into the Guanzhong torture room." At this time, Jiang Wenyuan didn't know that he was looking at an outstanding junior with a kind expression, but there was only one thought in Chu Xiu's mind. This good-looking and imposing fellow was the idiot who persistently courted death? In Chu Xiu's mind, everything that Jiang Wenyuan did was courting death. Instead of being a prince in peace, he had to jump out and stir up trouble. Regardless of whether it was roping in the powers of the martial world, making friends with the young talents and masters of the Jianghu, or recruiting large numbers of warriors to be his retainers, these actions were simply seeking death. They challenged the nerves of the Dongqi royal family time and time again. When the people of the Eastern Qi royal family had enough and didn't want this memorial archway, then Jiang Wenyuan's life would come to an end. But now Jiang Wenyuan was still alive and well, and this was also the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion, so Chu Xiu also pretended to be flattered and said, "Prince, you flatter me. I can have this status in the Guanzhong torture room because of Hall Leader Guan's promotion." At this time, Jiang Wenyuan suddenly narrowed his eyes and said, "But I feel that Guan Siyu's promotion is not enough." Chu Xiu was surprised and said, "What do you mean, Prince?" Jiang Wenyuan suddenly laughed and said, "Chu has just come to Eastern Qi, and this is also the first time he has come to the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. As the host, I naturally have to entertain you personally. It's a good opportunity for you to taste the specialties of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion." As he said this, Jiang Wenyuan directly pulled Chu Xiu to a corner on the 7th floor by the window and ordered people to arrange for the dishes to be served. At this time, Jiang Wenyuan walked back and said to the black-robed middle-aged man beside him, "Mr. Lu, let's stop here for today. We'll talk another day." Mr. Lu glanced at Jiang Wenyuan and said with a laugh, "I understand. I wish Prince success." Their words were like clouds in the clouds, and some people didn't understand. Only Mr. Lu and Jiang Wenyuan understood the meaning. Earlier, Jiang Wenyuan had told Mr. Lu about the enmity between him, Guan Siyu, and the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall. Of course, this was only a one-sided enmity for Jiang Wenyuan, and Guan Siyu had probably forgotten about it a long time ago. However, with Jiang Wenyuan's character, he was not prepared to treat Chu Xiu nicely, nor did he have the intention to recruit him. And just now, he found out that Chu Xiu was not a martial artist trained by the Guanzhong torture room. Before this, he was already in the top 20 of the Longhu list. He had only joined the Guanzhong torture room for less than 2 years, so the meaning of this was different. In such a short time, it was impossible for Chu Xiu to have much loyalty to the Guanzhong torture room. However, he could try to recruit him. While he obtained a young expert, he could also annoy Guan Siyu. Chapter 219. After Jiang Wenyuan found out about Chu Xiu's identity, he really wanted to recruit Chu Xiu. He didn't simply want to make friends with him. Instead, he wanted to recruit Chu Xiu as his subordinate and make him work for him. In all fairness, Jiang Wenyuan's subordinates were not weak. Over the years, he had relied on his identity as the king of peace and happiness, as well as his generosity, to recruit many martial artists as his followers. There were even great experts at the unity of heaven and man realm among them. However, there wasn't anyone like Chu Xiao who could stand out among the younger generation. An expert of the younger generation like Chu Xiao represented potential. If he were to be recruited, Chu Xiao's future achievements might not be inferior to those great experts who were one with the world. However, the price he would have to pay would be much lower. Moreover, it wasn't just potential. It also represented the strength of Jiang Wenyuan's subordinates, the Prince of Anluo residents. In addition to having a leader, any faction needed a powerhouse who could suppress the entire faction, a large number of capable core forces, and outstanding young disciples. Only then could it be considered a faction with unlimited potential. Jiang Wenyuan was ambitious. Naturally, he was developing in this direction. Over the years, he had recruited many high-level martial artists. There were also quite a few mid-tier martial artists like Shao Ting who had decent strength. However, he didn't have any outstanding young martial artists. Most of the young elites on the Longhu list were from aristocratic families or large sections. They could maintain a good relationship with Jiang Wenyuan, but they definitely wouldn't be loyal to him. Now that he had finally seen Chu Xiao and found out that he wasn't a disciple that had been nurtured by the Guanzhong torture room since he was young, Jiang Wenyuan naturally wanted to poach him. In the past, Guan Siyu had dared to make him lose face. Today, he was going to poach Guan Siyu. After Chu Xiao and Jiang Wenyuan took their seats, the other young elites on the 7th floor looked at Jiang Wenyuan in confusion. They didn't know why Jiang Wenyuan was giving Chu Xiao so much face. It must be known that with Jiang Wenyuan's status, there were countless young talents that came and went to the Dragon Gathering Pavilion these days, but those that were able to receive Jiang Wenyuan's personal reception were as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. What did Chu Xiao have to deserve such treatment from Jiang Wenyuan? Even Bai Wuji's expression was gloomy. Even he didn't receive such treatment. When he first arrived at the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, Jiang Wenyuan was very courteous and even personally welcomed him to the 7th floor. However, he didn't personally set up a banquet to receive him. After a while, a group of maids brought out the wine and dishes. It had to be said that the wine and dishes made by the Dragon Gathering Pavilion were very attractive. It could be said that they looked, smelled, and tasted great. There was also a faint but powerful spiritual energy floating around them. Jiang Wenyuan personally poured a cup of fragrant, amber wine for Chu Xiao and said with a smile, "In the wild mountains of West Chu, there was a rumor that some wild monkeys picked 100 fruits in a tree hole to store food for the winter. However, if there was no lack of food for the winter, the monkeys would forget about the fruits they stored. Then the fruits in the tree hole would gradually ferment and become 100-fruit wine, so it was called the monkey wine. Moreover, these wild monkeys don't know any treasures and will pick some rare spiritual fruits as if they were normal fruits. This causes the monkey wine to contain a shocking amount of medicinal energy. There were some cultivators who went to the wild mountains to pick herbs and accidentally found this monkey wine. After drinking it, they found that their cultivation base increased greatly. Chu Xiao said in a surprised voice, "This is the monkey wine you found in West Chu?" Jiang Wenyuan shook his head and said, "This monkey wine is something that can only be found by chance, it is too coincidental. Moreover, there is only a small amount of medicinal energy in the monkey wine, but my monkey wine is made from precious spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits. Its medicinal energy is even stronger than the authentic monkey wine. If Chu doesn't believe me, you can have a taste." Chu Xiao drank a mouthful of the wine in the cup. Instantly, he felt a wave of heat seeping into his body from the wine liquid. This cup of wine was actually more powerful than a 5th revolution Dan. It really is a treasure. Your Highness Dragon Gathering Pavilion truly lives up to its name. Chu Xiao gave a sigh of praise. Jiang Wenyuan gave a proud smile and pointed at the dishes on the table as he said, "Chu, you should also have a taste of these dishes. There aren't many dishes on the 7th floor, but each one is a treasure. They must be personally approved by me before they can be served. For example, this Return of the Phoenix's Nest is made from a Snow Ridge guinea fowl that has been fed with spirit herbs for more than 3 months. The phoenix nest below is also made from the bird's nest of the golden silk snow swallow in the extreme north of the northern swallow." Chu Xiao nodded and was not polite as he tasted the dishes one by one. Jiang Wenyuan really wasn't bragging, each one was a treasure. After eating for a while, Jiang Wenyuan suddenly asked, Chu is from the Blue Dragon Society. Why did you join the Guanzhong torture room in the end? Chu Xiao said indifferently, a branch leader of the Blue Dragon Society wanted to use me as a tool. I naturally wouldn't be willing to be used, so I betrayed them and escaped. Coincidentally, I met the Guanzhong hero, Chu Yuanxing, who was being chased. I saved him in passing and was then recommended by Hero Chu to be a patrol envoy in Guanzhong. Hearing Chu Xiao's words, Jiang Wenyuan's eyes immediately lit up. If this was the case, then it would be easier for him to recruit Chu Xiao. Originally, he thought that it was Guan Siyu who saved Chu Xiao, or that he had personally recruited Chu Xiao to join the Guanzhong torture room. He didn't expect that it was Chu Xiao who saved Chu Yuanxing and accidentally joined the Guanzhong torture room. There was no debt of gratitude between the two. Jiang Wenyuan played with the wine glass in his hand and suddenly asked, Chu, you've been in the Guanzhong torture room for a while now. What do you think of the Guanzhong torture room? Chu Xiao was a little confused as to why Jiang Wenyuan would ask him this. However, Chu Xiao naturally wouldn't say that the Guanzhong torture room looked harmonious and stable on the surface, but there were many contradictions on the inside. He only said in a low voice, under the leadership of Hallmaster Guan, the Guanzhong torture room established itself between the three countries and developed the Guanzhong torture room into such a prosperous place. Of course, it's a blessing for the warriors of my generation in the Guanzhong torture room. In other sects, disciples like me, who don't have a good background might be picked on and suppressed. However, in the Guanzhong torture room, everything is done according to the rules of merit. At least, it's fair. Jiang Wenyuan smiled and said, what you said is the truth. Guan Siyu isn't good in other things, but she's very impartial. She doesn't even care about her own disciple. However, I feel that Chu, developing in the Guanzhong torture room isn't a good thing. Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows and asked, why? Jiang Wenyuan lowered his voice and said in a low voice, it's because the Guanzhong torture room is too fair. That's why talented young warriors like you don't have any preferential treatment. You should know that the younger a warrior is when they step into the next realm, the greater their potential in the future. For example, Chu, at your age, you need a large amount of resources and elixirs to cultivate. If you delay your efforts, you will be left behind by the young talents on the Longhu list. But no matter how great your potential is, the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall still gives you a salary based on your position, and the amount is pitifully low. Young friend Chu, you should have a deep understanding of this. Chu Xiao rubbed his head. They seemed to have vaguely guessed what Jiang Wenyuan meant. However, Chu Xiao still put on a puzzled expression and said, you're slandering the Guanzhong torture room in front of me. What do you mean, Your Highness? Jiang Wenyuan snorted coldly and said, I'm not slandering you. I'm just stating the truth. I know Guan Siyu's character very well. No matter how outstanding your performance in the Guanzhong torture room is, you won't get any preferential treatment. He treats his disciple like this, let alone you. Moreover, the development of the Guanzhong area is limited. It's in the middle of three countries. It's like walking on thin ice. It's fine when the three countries stop fighting. If the three countries continue to fight, what will the Guanzhong torture room do? Chu, you're able to rank in the top 20 of the Longhu list at such a young age without relying on a sect. This is enough to prove your potential. As the saying goes, a good bird chooses a tree to nest in. You have to consider your own future. Don't waste your potential. Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes. Only now did he understand what Jiang Wenyuan meant. However, Chu Xiao didn't say it out loud. He only said in a low voice, Your Highness, what do you mean? Jiang Wenyuan waved his hand and said in a low voice, a straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. Chu, you're able to represent the Guanzhong torture room to participate in the God Weapon Conference and meet me here. This is fate. Since you're here at the Dragon Assembling Pavilion, you should have some understanding of me. I cherish talents the most, especially talents like you, Chu. Now that I have retainers and consecrators, if Chu is willing to join me, then I, Chu, will be the third type of person. Although I won't be a consecrator, I'll be treated better than one. Furthermore, I won't have to fight every day like a retainer. I guarantee that my prince's residents of Enlil will do our best to nurture you, Chu. Chu, what you can get will definitely be much better than what you can get in the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu looked at Jiang Wenyuan with a slightly astonished gaze. He had not expected Jiang Wenyuan to be so direct, promising great benefits to recruit him on their first meeting. Furthermore, Chu Xiu had to admit that what Jiang Wenyuan said made sense. The Guanzhong torture room was indeed in an awkward position. Whether it was externally or internally, there were many risks. It was only because of Chu Kuanga and Guan Siyu that it managed to achieve its current status. In the original plot, the Guanzhong torture room had experienced several huge shocks. However, Chu Xiu didn't pay much attention to the details at that time, so he couldn't remember them now. Jiang Wenyuan said that the Guanzhong torture room wouldn't give Chu Xiu any preferential treatment or resources. This might be a disadvantage to others, but it was exactly what Chu Xiu wanted. Chu Xiu didn't need any preferential treatment at all. Back then, Chu Xiu chose the Guanzhong torture room because the Guanzhong torture room didn't care about one's background and could maintain absolute neutrality. Chapter 220. Jiang Wenyuan was right when he said that a fine bird chose a good tree to nest in. However, the problem was that Jiang Wenyuan was not a good tree. If Chu Xiu really chose to side with Jiang Wenyuan, he would be courting death. One could tell from Jiang Wenyuan's current behavior that he had been walking on the path of courting death without stopping. If Chu Xiu really sided with Jiang Wenyuan, he would probably end up in a miserable state. He would probably die even faster. Moreover, Chu Xiu also had his own ambitions. A fine bird chose a good tree to nest in. All along, Chu Xiu had not wanted to be a fine bird, but a divine tree that could attract countless fine birds. Therefore, after hearing Jiang Wenyuan's straightforward solicitation, Chu Xiu's expression turned solemn. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. I am ashamed to accept it. However, when I, Chu Xiu, was at my lowest point, it was the Guanzhong torture room that took me in. Although I, Chu Xiu, am not a good person, I know the principle of repaying kindness. Therefore, forgive me for not accepting Your Highness's solicitation." After speaking, Chu Xiu cupped his hands and turned to leave. Jiang Wenyuan looked at Chu Xiu's back as he left. He clenched his fists and said coldly, "I gave you face, but you don't want it." Chu Xiu's rejection reminded him of the time when he had personally tried to recruit Guan Siyu and been rejected by her. Although Chu Xiu's words were tactful and not as blunt as Guan Siyu's, the meaning revealed was the same. That was, "I don't like you." Eastern Qi was the strongest among the three countries. Eastern Qi occupied the most prosperous land in the world, the Central Plains. This country, this world, should belong to him. If not for the surnamed Lu who had usurped the throne of the Jiang family, if he represented the Eastern Qi royal family to recruit Chu Xiu, how could Chu Xiu refuse? How could he dare to refuse? Jiang Wenyuan's usually kind eyes were now filled with gloom. At the same time, he thought to himself that he would take back what belonged to him sooner or later. At that time, whether it was Guan Siyu or Chu Xiu, they would have to submit to Eastern Qi. Not the Lu family's Eastern Qi, but the Jiang family's. At this time, the people on the 7th floor of the Dragon Assembly Pavilion were also surprised to see Chu Xiu leaving. They did not know what was going on. The Dragon Assembling Pavilion was filled with arrays. Not only could it prevent warriors from fighting here, but it also had the effect of transmitting sound. Chu Xiu and Jiang Wenyuan sat in a corner. No one present could hear what they were saying. They only saw the two of them talking nicely just now. In the end, they turned hostile in an instant. What was going on? The Dragon Assembly Pavilion was full of arrays. Not only could they prevent warriors from fighting here, but they also had the effect of recording. Chu Xiu and Jiang Wenyuan were sitting in a corner. No one present could hear what they were saying. They only saw that the two of them were having a good conversation, but in the blink of an eye, they had fallen out. What was going on? Jianghu was the memorial arch that the Lu royal family had set up. As a prince with a different surname, he had lived better than a portion of the orthodox Lu royal family. It was clearly not a wise move to offend Jianghu in a place like Dongqi. On the first floor, Li Bu-san was still waiting. When he saw Chu Xiu come out, he quickly smiled and said, "Young master, why did you come out so quickly?" Chu Xiu looked up and said indifferently, "If I don't come out soon, I'm afraid I will be chased away. Let's go. Find me a comfortable inn. I want to stay." Li Bu-san was a little confused. Of course, if he knew that Chu Xiu had offended the powerful Jianghu in Eastern Qi, he would probably be so scared that he would return the purple gold to Chu Xiu and never come to Chu Xiu again. At night, Jianghu sat alone on the 9th floor of the Dragon Assembly Pavilion, drinking wine. At this time, the door of the 9th floor was pushed open. Mr. Lu, who had personally talked to Jianghu during the day, pushed open the door and entered. Seeing Jianghu gloomy face, Mr. Lu smiled and said, "Prince, I heard that you failed to recruit Chu Xiu." Jianghu snorted coldly and said, "He is the same as Guan Siyu. He doesn't know what is good for him. Based on the foundation of the Guanzhong torture room, I want to see if Chu Xiu will regret it in the future." Mr. Lu shook his head and said, "Forget it. Prince, please calm down. He is just a junior martial artist. Every year, there are many young talents in the pugilistic world. However, there are not many who can make it to the end. By the way, Prince, how are the preparations on your side? The people from the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa have already arrived. We need to prepare everything before the God Weapon Conference begins." Jianghu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. I have been operating in Eastern Qi for so many years. Can I not even handle such a small matter?" Mr. Lu cupped his hands and said, "Then this one can rest assured. Although this is a small matter for your highness, it is a big matter for us. If this cooperation is successful, in the future, if your highness has something to ask of us, we can still cooperate." Jianghu nodded and suddenly asked, "Actually, I don't understand why you are doing this. Dugu Weiwei has been dead for hundreds of years, and the Kunlun devil cult has long been destroyed. Look at the moon-worshipping cult in Miaojiang, and then look at the evil Poles sect in Northern Plains. These demonic sects that used to rely on the Kunlun devil cult are now living very comfortably. If you learn from them, you don't need to hide like you are now. You can only act in the dark." As soon as Jianghu words left his mouth, Mr. Lu's expression abruptly changed. His gaze became extremely gloomy, and the aura around him became incomparably furious. Strong wind swept out, and true energy roared. This Mr. Lu, who seemed extremely ordinary, was actually a great expert who was one with the world. "Shut up. As long as the sacred fire is not extinguished, the Devil Lord will not die. At the peak of West Kunlun, even if the bald donkeys of the Bodhi Zen monastery used the 6 paths of Buddha reincarnation formation to seal it, the rootless sacred fire was still burning. Who would dare say that the Devil Lord was dead? Even the sovereign list of wind-sweeping tower has a place for the Devil Lord. Ning Xuanji is known as an immortal, but he is also immortal. He alone can't kill the Devil Lord." Just as Mr. Lu's aura burst forth, several auras also burst forth from the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. Among them was the unity of heaven and man, as well as the 5 Qis unifications. Clearly, as soon as Mr. Lu made a move, they would immediately attack. Jianghu was also shocked by Mr. Lu's reaction. He did not expect that his curious question would make Mr. Lu, who had always been extremely calm, so agitated. Seeing this, Jianghu quickly said, "Mr. Lu, please don't take it to heart. I was just saying without thinking. I didn't mean to offend anyone or the Kunlun devil cult." At this time, Mr. Lu also retracted his aura and returned to his previous calm self. He cupped his hands at Jianghu and said, "Forgive me, Your Highness. I was a little too agitated. Jiang Wenyuan chuckled and said, "It's fine. I was too rash just now." With that, Mr. Lu walked out of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. Only then did Jiang Wenyuan let out a long sigh of relief. He took out a handkerchief to wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. In terms of cultivation level, he was only at the innate stage. Although his status was there, strength was still strength. He still felt pressured when facing a unity of heaven and man expert who was truly enraged. At this time, Uncle Chi walked in from the side with a cup of ginseng tea. He placed the teacup on Jiang Wenyuan's table and said hesitantly, "Your Highness, these guys are related to the Kunlun devil cult of the past. They're not a good group. Isn't it a little bad for us to work with them and be so close to them?" Jiang Wenyuan picked up the ginseng tea and drank it in one gulp. He let out a long sigh and said, "If there were other people I would work with, I wouldn't want to work with them either. But now, who else can I work with? The Mo family of the Mirror Lake Manor?" On the first day that Mo Yezi returned to the Mirror Lake Manor from Jianghu, this king personally went to greet him, giving him enough face. In the end, that old fart refused to even refine a weapon for this king. He even said that this king was not worthy of the weapon he refined. Does he really think that this king cares about the weapon he refined? And that hidden sword villa, this prince found 3 of the weapons from the world's famous sword manuals, just so that the disciples of Hidden Sword Villa could become my swordsmanship instructors. In the end, Hidden Sword Villa only sent a few disciples with different surnames. Do they think this prince is an idiot? Even that young warrior, Chu Xiu, didn't give me face. At this point, Jiang Wenyuan's face was already cold. Whether it's in the court or in the Jianghu, these guys are very powerful. Under normal circumstances, it would be extremely difficult for me to work with them. I can only find another way. Uncle Chi, you've been with me for so many years. You should know what's going on with the Jiang family. I don't have any talent for cultivation. I was only able to reach the Xiantian realm because of the accumulation of elixirs. However, I don't have any talent for cultivation. My father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and all my children don't have any talent for cultivation. Don't tell me you can't figure out the reason. Jiang Wenyuan's face was already filled with malevolence. All these years, my Jiang family can't even cultivate our family's secret techniques. We can only watch as the Lu family cultivates our Jiang family's 9 Dragons Emperor Supreme technique. The Lu family wants my Jiang family to live happily for the rest of their lives. How could it be so easy? Uncle Chi, I can never forget what my father said to me before he died. Don't forget that my Jiang family is destined to be a royal family. In the past, when my Jiang family's founding emperor descended into this world, there was a thunderstorm. 9 dragons coiled in the void. After passing down the 9 dragons Emperor Supreme technique, they flew into the sky. When the founding emperor came of age, he swept through the world and ended the war between the small countries in the Central Plains. Only then did the great Qi dynasty flourish. My Jiang family should be the ruler of this world. We are born to be a royal family. Uncle Qi knelt on one knee in front of Jiang Wenyuan and said, "If your highness hadn't helped me back then, this old man would already be a skeleton in a grave. This old man has no other requests in this life. I'm only willing to go through fire and water for your highness, even if I have to die 10,000 times." Following Uncle Chi's words, the surrounding people also chimed in, "We're willing to go through fire and water for your highness, even if we have to die 10,000 times." A silent smile appeared on Jiang Wenyuan's face. This was the reason why he, the king of peace and happiness, didn't have to continue living in peace. Chapter 221. What happened in the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion did not affect Chu Xiu's mood. Although he had offended Jiang Wenyuan, he was not worried that Jiang Wenyuan would do anything to him here. After all, Chu Xiu represented the Guanzhong torture room. If Jiang Wenyuan attacked him, it was equivalent to attacking the Guanzhong torture room. Furthermore, Jiang Wenyuan wouldn't touch Chu Xiu even if it was for his own sake. In front of outsiders, Jiang Wenyuan had always shown himself to be very forthright and magnanimous. Right now, others still didn't know that he had been rejected when he tried to recruit Chu Xiu. If he were to make a move on Chu Xiu at this time, wouldn't it be equivalent to confessing without being pressed and ruining his own reputation? Therefore, Chu Xiu continued to wander around the Ji State Prefecture for the past few days. At the same time, many people from the pugilistic world came to the Ji State Prefecture during this period of time. The entire Ji State Prefecture was in a mess, and it was almost impossible to contain them. Chu Xiu could not be bothered to squeeze with those people in the Ji Province Prefecture, so he went directly to the Water Cloud Temple next to the Mirror Lake outside the city. On one side of the Mirror Lake was the Mo family's Mirror Lake Villa, and on the other side was a small Taoist temple called the Water Cloud Temple. In the Mirror Lake, Chu Xiu sat on a small boat, looking at the scenery outside. There was a pot of yellow wine and a few side dishes on the bow. If it was not the wretched Li Busan beside him, but a gentle and affectionate beauty, this scene would probably be more poetic. At this time, there were many small boats on the Mirror Lake. Obviously, there were many warriors who thought that the Ji State Prefecture was too crowded, so they came here to relax. Anyway, it was not too far away from the God Weapon Convention of the Mirror Lake Villa. At this time, Li Busan was introducing the situation of the Water Cloud Temple to Chu Xiu. Young master, in 2 hours, Daoist Xianxia of the Water Cloud Temple will be preaching. If you are interested, you can go and listen. Chu Xiu took a sip of the warm yellow wine and asked, "Is this Water Cloud Temple's Daoist Xianxia very strong?" Li Busan scratched his head and said hesitantly, "Daoist priest Xianxia? He doesn't seem to know any martial arts. At least, in all the years I've been in the Ji State Prefecture, I've never seen Daoist priest Xianxia fight with anyone. At most, I've seen him perform some Daoist qi nurturing moves, but they're slow and powerless. Moreover, the scale of the Water Cloud Temple is also very small. There are only Daoist priest Xianxia and a few orphans that he took in when they were young. These orphans were raised by him to become little Daoist priests. After they came of age, they went to the Jianghu to preach and travel." When Chu Xiu heard this, a look of interest appeared in his eyes. He didn't believe that the Taoist priest of the Water Cloud Temple didn't know martial arts. One had to know that the Mirror Lake was a treasured land of feng shui. However, in this huge Mirror Lake, on one side was the Mirror Lake Manor's Mo clan, and on the other side was the Water Cloud Monastery. Wasn't this strange? It was normal for the Mo clan to be there. Although the Mo clan wasn't very strong, they had Mo Yezi, the former pavilion master of the Divine Weapon Pavilion and a great master of blacksmithing. Ordinary powers couldn't compare to them. Therefore, it was normal that other powers didn't dare to establish their power next to the Mirror Lake. Moreover, the Water Cloud Temple looked very ordinary. There was only an old Daoist priest and a group of young Daoist priests. However, it was able to face the Mirror Lake Manor's Mo clan across the lake. If there was nothing fishy going on, Chu Xiu wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Li Busan continued, every time after lunch, Daoist priest Xianxia would explain the Daoist scriptures to the young Daoist priests in front of the Water Cloud Temple. Anyone who is interested can come and watch. The things that ordinary Daoist priests talked about were so profound that they gave me a headache just by looking at them. However, Daoist priest Xianxia was able to use the simplest context to explain those things. Even a rough person like me could understand them. I don't know why, but every time I listen to Daoist priest Xianxia talk about these things, I always feel like I've thought of something. It's very strange. Therefore, whenever I have time, I will come and listen to Daoist priest Xianxia's teachings. There are also many martial artists in the Ji State Prefecture who come to listen to Daoist priest Xianxia's teachings. Daoist priest Xianxia doesn't hide anything. No matter how many people listen, he always says what he wants to say. After hearing Li Busan's description, Chu Xiu became interested in Daoist priest Xianxia of the Water Cloud Temple. He wanted to see if this Daoist priest was a hidden expert. If this Daoist priest Xianxia was really an expert, and Li Busan, who had known him for more than 10 years, could not detect his strength, then it proved that Daoist priest Xianxia had successfully hidden himself from the world. At this moment, a luxurious passenger ship made a splash and sailed to the side of Chu Xiu's boat. A voice chuckled and said, "It seems that Brother Chu is in a good mood. I wonder how the style of our Eastern Qi is. Is it comparable to the style of Guangzhong?" A figure dressed in a golden brocade robe leaped down from the passenger ship, and an almost undetectable sound of Gang Qi rang out from beneath his feet. He was easily dragged onto Chu Xiu's small boat. Chu Xiu remembered this person in front of him. A few days ago, he was on the 7th floor of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. Judging from his status and the fact that he was surrounded by a crowd, he should not be of low status. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Guangzhong has experienced war and there is really nothing beautiful about the scenery. The so-called prosperity is only due to the trade caravans and martial artists coming and going from the 3 countries. In reality, there are not many locals in Guangzhong." After saying this, Chu Xiu cupped his hands at the young man and said, "May I know your name?" The young man smiled and said, "Not a problem. I am Mo Tianlin of the Mo family of Xiangyang." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Number 15 on the Longhu roll, ink-drunk sword Mo Tianlin?" The Mo family of Xiangyang of Eastern Qi was one of the 9 aristocratic families in the world. Although it was not at the top, it had not declined for 1,000 years and its strength had always been stable. Mo Tianlin shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "I did not think of this nickname myself. It is not something to be proud of." The nickname, Ink-Drunk Sword, did not refer to Mo Tianlin's martial arts or his weapon. Instead, it referred to the time when Mo Tianlin was young and frivolous. He hid his identity and pursued a prostitute but failed. In his drunken stupor, he danced with his sword and used it as a brush. He splashed ink and wrote a sad song that spread throughout the entire Eastern Qi. As a disciple of the Mo family of Xiangyang, one of the 9 aristocratic families, he pursued a prostitute but failed. As a disciple of a martial arts family, he wanted to make a name for himself in Eastern Qi with a song. This was really embarrassing. Mo Tianlin was beaten up by his father and locked in the ancestral hall for 2 years. But who would have thought that Mo Tianlin would suddenly become enlightened because of this incident? His cultivation improved rapidly and he went from the blood condensation stage to the physical invulnerability stage in 2 years. After he came out to roam the Jianghu, he showed extraordinary strength and climbed to the 15th place on the Longhu list within a year. But when Mo Tianlin became famous, someone revealed the frivolous things he did in his youth. As a result, Mo Tianlin's nickname became Ink-Drunk Sword. It sounded poetic, but in fact, it was the most humiliating moment for Mo Tianlin. Chu Xiu did not know about these past events. But if people around him who were familiar with his past also called him by this nickname, Mo Tianlin would turn hostile. Chu Xiu really did not know about the frivolous past of Mo Tianlin. He only remembered the names and backgrounds of the top 20 martial artists on the Longhu list, but he would not memorize all their detailed information. At this moment, Mo Tianlin smiled and said, "Brother Chu and Prince Anil seemed to have some conflict yesterday?" Today, he took the initiative to talk to Chu Xiu because he was overflowing with gossip and purely out of curiosity. It was fine that he did not see Chu Xiu. Coincidentally, he was also touring the lake, so he came to chat with Chu Xiu. He was also a little curious about Chu Xiu. Among the top 20 of the Longhu list, there were very few martial artists who were originally loose cultivators. It could be said that they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Although Chu Xiu was now the patrol inspector of the Guangzhong torture room, his background was that of a standard loose cultivator. Being able to reach this step, Mo Tianlin was also very curious. Chu Xiu shook his head. He did not spread the news of Jiang Wenyuan recruiting him to the city. He only said lightly, just some differences of opinion. I, Chu Xiu, was born in the wilderness, while Prince Anil was once a member of the royal family. Of course, we are not on the same page. Hearing that Chu Xiu did not want to say anything, Mo Tianlin did not force him. Instead, he said, "Actually, Prince Anil falling out with you could be your own bad luck, taking the blame for your hall master. Chu Xiu said in surprise, Hall Master Guan has a grudge with Prince Anil? Mo Tianlin smiled and said, my Mo family is the local tyrant of Eastern Qi. I have heard some news. It is said that when Hall Master Guan Siyu came to Eastern Qi to meet the royal family to discuss the status of the Guanzhong torture room, Prince Anil had contact with Hall Master Guan, but for some reason, they parted on bad terms. Chu Xiu's eyes immediately revealed a strange expression when he heard that. If he guessed correctly, Jiang Wenyuan should have tried to recruit Guan Siyu just like how he had done in the past. If this was the case, he didn't know how to evaluate Jiang Wenyuan anymore. This was simply ridiculous. At that time, it was more than 20 years ago. Guan Siyu had already taken over the position of the Guanzhong torture room's hall master. She was also a martial arts grand master of the real pellet state. She was definitely an overlord-level character. And what about Jiang Wenyuan at that time? Even with the identity of Prince Anil, he was just a junior. The newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger. He actually wanted to recruit Guan Siyu and the entire Guanzhong torture room. If it was Chu Xiu, he would probably turn hostile. Chu Xiu shook his head and smiled faintly. Whether Prince Anil has a grudge with Hall Master Guan or with me, I will return to Guanzhong after the Divine Weapon Convention anyway. Why do I care so much? Speaking of which, the people who came to the Divine Weapon Convention this time are much fewer than I thought. I didn't even see the top 5 of the Longhu list. Mo Tianlin smiled and said, in our opinion, a divine weapon is something that can only be encountered by chance. Even my Mo family's old ancestor doesn't have a divine weapon in his hands. But for the top 5 of the Longhu list, as long as they really grow up and step into the realm of martial arts Grand Master, the sect will naturally prepare a divine weapon for them. Why bother to come here to fight for a divine weapon that you don't even know what it is? Chapter 222. Not only did the martial artists from the major sects and aristocratic families have a much higher starting line than those who were born in the wilderness, they also had access to unimaginable resources in the future. This was how important one's background was, and how unfair the heavens were. But this was the way of the world, and no one could do anything about it. Chu Xiu looked at Mo Tianlin and said, Brother Mo, are you envious of those people? Mo Tianlin smiled bitterly and said, Of course I'm envious. It would be a lie to say that I'm not envious. Although my Mo family is one of the 9 great aristocratic families, our ranking is neither high nor low. We know our own strength very well. For example, that little celestial master Zhang Qingjin was born with everything he had. The position of the next celestial master is destined to be his. Also, the 10th place in the famous sword spectrum, one of the 3 divine weapons of Mount Longhu, the evil slaying sword, will also be wielded by Zhang Qingjin in the future. But for people like us, we have to scheme against each other within our families and fight with people in the Jianghu to obtain all of this. But for others, it's so easy. Chu Xiu poured a cup of wine for Mo Tianlin and said lightly, Actually, Brother Mo, you don't have to compare yourself with people like Zhang Qingjin. As a disciple of the Mo family, Brother Mo already has a lot. At the very least, you have the qualifications to fight with these heroes in the Jianghu. What you don't know is that for most low-level martial artists, staying alive is already doing their best. Chu Xiu's words made Mo Tianlin's whole body tremble. Doing their best to stay alive was indeed not something someone with his background could imagine. Mo Tianlin smiled freely and shook his head. Listening to Brother Chu's words, it seems like I'm being unreasonable. Compared to the majority of martial artists who cultivate alone, martial artists like me who come from sects and aristocratic families are indeed much better. Just as Mo Tianlin was chatting with Chu Xiu, a burst of exclamations suddenly came from the surrounding boats. Chu Xiu looked in the direction of the sound and saw a person walking over from the lake. That person was a handsome young man in his 20s. He wore a gray warrior suit, and his long black hair hung loosely behind him. He didn't wear a crown, and looked free and unrestrained. Moreover, he carried a long sword wrapped in linen on his back without a scabbard, which looked a little strange. At this moment, the young man was walking on the water. Every time his feet landed on the water, there would be an explosion of astral energy. It was as if a physical body had exploded, causing his body to soar into the air. Only then could he run on the water. Walking on water sounded simple, and any martial artist who had reached the physical invulnerability realm should be able to do it. However, in reality, it was rare to find someone who had reached the oneness of heaven and man realm, let alone a physical invulnerability expert. Continuously exploding the stellar energy under one's feet to achieve the goal of supporting oneself, this required not only the cultivation of the martial artist's own inner strength, but also the control of the stellar energy. Seeing this person coming, the corner of Mo Tianlin's mouth immediately revealed a smile. Another acquaintance. As he spoke, the young man had already arrived in front of Chu Xiu's boat. With one step, he came directly in front of Chu Xiu and Mo Tianlin. Mo Tianlin, I haven't seen you for more than a year, but you're still the same. Mo Tianlin smiled. Just as he was about to say some polite words, he heard the young man continue. Your strength still hasn't improved at all. The greeting he was about to say was immediately swallowed back by Mo Tianlin. He coldly snorted. Xia Xiaolu, your mouth is still so smelly. After rebuking him, Mo Tianlin then introduced him to Chu Xiu. This is Hundredly Flying Feather, Xia Xiaolu, from West Chu's World Alliance. Chu Xiu looked at him. This person was also an outstanding talent on the Longhu list. His ranking was even higher than Mo Tianlin's, 12th. Moreover, his background was also extraordinary. He came from the World Alliance of the Six Gangs. His master was the famous World Alliance's leader, Thousand Li of Mountains and Rivers Qinqing Di. That person was an outstanding talent. Like Nie Renlong from the morgue, he also came from the wilderness. If Nie Renlong relied on his own methods to slowly build up the foundation of the morgue, then Qinqing Di used his own pair of iron fists to build up the World Alliance's Thousand Li of Mountains and Rivers. Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, So it's Brother Xia, I've heard a lot about you. Mo Tianlin then pointed at Chu Xiu and said, This is Brother Chu Xiu. In the past, he was the gold medal assassin, blood demon, of the Blue Dragon Society. Now, he is the Guanxi Patrol Inspector of the Guanzhong Torture Room. He is also ranked in the top 20 of the Longhu list. Although Chu Xiu was ranked in the top 20 of the Longhu list, his fame was mostly in the northern Yan East Yan region. In the entire Jianghu, he wasn't very famous. Even if most people didn't look at the Longhu list, they wouldn't even remember Chu Xiu's name. Therefore, Mo Tianlin introduced him in detail, afraid that Xia Xiaolu wouldn't know Chu Xiu. However, after hearing Chu Xiu's name, Xia Xiaolu suddenly said, You're that Chu Xiu who beat up that brat Lin Kaiyun to the point where not a single part of his body is left unscathed? Also, little Marquis Lu Fengxian, are you your friend? Chu Xiu shrugged and said, I don't know if Lin Kaiyun suffered a blow or not, but when he caused trouble in the Guanzhong torture room, I fought with him and defeated him. I don't know what happened to him after he returned to Sword King City. Lu Fengxian is indeed this one's friend. Brother Xia, did you meet him in the West Chu land? I wonder how Brother Lu is doing. On the side, Mo Tianlin looked at Chu Xiu, blinked, and said, Brother Chu, it seems like you've hidden yourself quite well. Even Wind-Sweeping Pavilion's intelligence doesn't have this information. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, If I announced it to the world just because I defeated Lin Kaiyun, wouldn't Sword King City's people come after me? Xia Xiaolu's cold face pulled out a smile and said, Even if you don't announce it, Sword King City's people will still hate you in their hearts. I've long been unhappy with that kid Lin Kaiyun. I was waiting for him to come out of seclusion to teach him a lesson. I didn't expect that when I ran into Sword King City's people, I heard that Lin Kaiyun was defeated by you and was unable to recover. He's been muddling around in Sword King City all day and is almost crippled. Chu Xiu rubbed his nose. If this was the case, then Chu Xiu was really wrong this time. Last time in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu really didn't have any killing intent towards Lin Kaiyun. He just wanted to teach him a lesson. Lin Kaiyun's injuries weren't fatal. But who would have thought that Lin Kaiyun's state of mind would be so poor? He suffered such a small blow and almost died. This was equivalent to Chu Xiu crippling one of Sword King City's younger generation's geniuses. This enmity wasn't small. Chu Xiu hadn't expected this. Xia Xiaolu said to Chu Xiu, "Actually, I already knew about you before this matter. I got to know Lu Fengxian more than a year ago. He's also an outstanding talent. If it wasn't for him not wanting to cause trouble, with Brother Lu's strength, he would definitely be ranked on the Dragon and Tiger list. Even my master wanted to recruit Brother Lu after meeting him. Unfortunately, Brother Lu refused and went back to roaming the world. At that time, Brother Lu mentioned Brother Chu to me. For Brother Lu to praise you so much, you're definitely not an ordinary person." When talking about Lu Fengxian, Xia Xiaolu's face, which didn't have much expression, revealed a look of admiration. Obviously, he admired Lu Fengxian very much. This was very normal in Chu Xiu's eyes. He understood Lu Fengxian's character. He could make many friends, but at the same time, he was also the easiest to be used by others. And in terms of strength, Lu Fengxian didn't need to be mentioned. His future achievements could already explain everything. At this time, Mo Tianlin suddenly asked Xia Xiaolu, "Right, why did you come to the God Weapon Convention this time? Not to mention the fact that you might not be able to obtain the God Weapon, even if you did obtain the God Weapon, that God Weapon would be a blade. But are you willing to give up the floating feather blade that you've been cultivating since you were a child and that you've already cultivated it to the point of cultivating your life and death?" Xia Xiaolu lightly said, "I'm just here to join in the fun. After being in closed-door cultivation in West Chu for so long, it's so boring that it's about to rust. I came out to relax and see if there's anyone I don't like that I can teach a lesson to." Hearing this, Chu Xiu and Mo Tianlin were a bit speechless. This reason was a bit too strong. Moreover, Chu Xiu had a very interesting discovery. Xia Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin had completely different personalities, but the two of them could become good friends. This was very interesting. Mo Tianlin's personality was cool and indifferent. He also had the courtesy and self-restraint of someone from a large family. He had a sense of propriety when doing things. Although you wouldn't like this kind of person at first sight, at least you wouldn't hate them. On the other hand, Xia Xiaolu was the opposite. He was cold and indifferent, his words were stinky and hard, and his temper was a bit strange. For people he liked, like Lu Fengxian, even if the other party's background and ranking on the Dragon and Tiger list couldn't compare to his, he would still admire them. On the other hand, if it was someone he disliked, like Lin Kaiyun, even if Chu Xiu didn't make a move against Lin Kaiyun, Xia Xiaolu was prepared to teach the other party a lesson. For two people with this kind of personality to become good friends, other than fate, there was also the fact that their families were far apart. In the world of martial arts, people couldn't help themselves. Sometimes you couldn't even choose your friends or lovers. The Xiangyang Mo family was in Eastern Qi and the Heaven Alliance was in West Chu. They were separated by tens of thousands of miles. Not to mention conflict, they didn't even have any business dealings. That's why Xia Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin didn't have any interest in each other. "That's right, Brother Chu, where are you planning to go in a bit?" Mo Tianlin asked. Chu Xiu pointed at the Water Cloud Temple and said, "I heard that the Water Cloud Temple's Daoist priest Xianxia is very skilled. I'm going to listen to his teachings." Mo Tianlin muttered in confusion, "Water Cloud Temple's Daoist priest Xianxia? I've never heard of any Daoist masters nearby." Just as he said this, Mo Tianlin suddenly remembered something his father seemed to have told him, so Mo Tianlin quickly changed his mind and said, "All right, let's go to the Water Cloud Temple for a stroll. We can take a break there." Chapter 223. The boat rowed towards the Water Cloud Temple on the other side of Mirror Lake. Chu Xiu and the other two sat at the bow, drinking and chatting, while Li Bu-san rowed at the stern. But at this time, he did not have the slightest complaint and was even ecstatic in his heart. He was just an ancient martial art practitioner at the bottom of the Ji State Prefecture, but now he could row a boat for 3 outstanding individuals ranked on the Longhu list. This was a great qualification. After the God Weapon Convention, this would be enough for him to brag about for 3 years. After reaching the other side, Chu Xiu found that the Water Cloud Temple was really a small temple, with only a Taoist temple and a few guest rooms. There was a row of pavilions outside the Water Cloud Temple, specially prepared for people who came to Mirror Lake for a walk to rest. At this time, there were hundreds of cultivators gathered around the pavilion. There were loose cultivators and cultivators from various aristocratic families. When they saw the 3 of them, they immediately started discussing among themselves. However, they could not help but step aside, giving the best position in the center to the 3 of them. Mo Tianlin was the local snake of Eastern Qi, and nearly half of the people here were from Eastern Qi. Seeing Mo Tianlin come, they naturally gave him face. Some of the West Chu cultivators were also greeting Xia Xiaolu. It was clear that they knew this famous tiger and dragon list elite. Chu Xiu was the least famous one here, not many people knew him, only a few people from northern Yan knew Chu Xiu, and among them was Chu Xiu's acquaintance, Bai Wuji. Seeing Chu Xiu come, Bai Wuji coldly snorted. Since when did this Chu Xiu hang out with Mo Tianlin and Xia Xiaolu? Although he was a little unhappy with Chu Xiu, the God Weapon Conference was about to start. He did not want to waste his energy here, so he just coldly snorted at Chu Xiu and did not speak. On the other side, Xia Xiaolu saw Bai Wuji's expression and whispered to Chu Xiu, "Is there a grudge?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "He is the one who has enmity with me, not the other way around. Previously, I had a few conflicts with him in the northern drifting snow city. After that, because Wind's Sweeping Tower ranked me above Bai Wuji on the Longhu leaderboard, he felt that it was unfair in his heart. A few days ago, he even caused trouble for me at the Dragon Assembling Pavilion. Brother Mo saw it." When Mo Tianlin heard this, he shook his head and said, "Bai Wuji cares too much about fame and fortune. Strength isn't something that Wind's Sweeping Tower can decide, it's something that we have to fight for." Zhang Qingzhen had been number 1 on the Tiger and Dragon roll for more than 10 years. Even if Wind's Sweeping Tower said that he was not number 1, who would believe it? If you, Bai Wuji, had the ability, even if Wind's Sweeping Tower ranked you last, the people of the Jianghu would not agree. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Unfortunately, in the Jianghu, fame and fortune are the most difficult things to let go of. However, whether Bai Wuji can let go of it or not is none of my business, as long as he doesn't provoke me." Everyone sat in the pavilion for a while. Then, an old Daoist priest in his 60s walked out of the Water Cloud Temple. His gray robe was very clean, and his hair was not gray at all. His spirit, qi, and spirit were very good. Chu Xiu let out a soft cry of surprise. He sensed a very strange feeling from the old Taoist priest. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but if he had to forcibly describe it, the word natural would be more suitable. That's right, it wasn't the aura of a martial artist, but a natural feeling. Seeing Daoist Master Xianqing come out, some of the loose cultivators present bowed to him and greeted him. Their attitudes were extremely courteous. These rogue cultivators did not have a master to guide them in their cultivation. In the past, they had to rely on themselves to comprehend the Tao. Often, they would be stuck at a bottleneck for a long time. No one knew who happened to pass by the Water Cloud Monastery and heard Daoist priest Xianqing preaching to the little Daoist children. It was obviously some very basic principles, to the point of being straightforward, but it gave that martial artist an epiphany and allowed him to make a breakthrough. After this news spread, it attracted many individual cultivators. Every day, they would listen to Daoist priest Xianqing's lectures. Of course, not everyone would gain anything from it. However, everyone thought that Daoist priest Xianqing's lectures were very good. Some of the obscure Daoist scriptures were easy to understand in Daoist priest Xianqing's lectures. Some of the individual cultivators who had cultivated some Daoist cultivation methods had gained something. When these people did not understand, they would ask Daoist priest Xianqing for advice. However, Daoist priest Xianxia said that he did not know martial arts and only knew how to recite Daoist scriptures. Therefore, when people came to ask him for advice, he would answer kindly. Of course, it had to be a question that had nothing to do with martial arts. Looking at the people around him, Daoist priest Xianxia's eyes showed a hint of surprise. Obviously, he did not expect so many people to come today. Moreover, there were many young talents with profound cultivation among them. However, Daoist priest Xianxia did not say anything. Behind him, 6 little Daoist children, who were about 10 years old, sat obediently under Daoist priest Xianxia and listened attentively. Daoist priest Xianxia did not take out any books. He just casually played with a horsetail whisk. He looked at the 6 little Daoist children and said, "Today, we will be talking about 5 energies collecting." As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned except for the martial artists who had heard Daoist priest Xianxia's preaching before. An ordinary Daoist priest was preaching about 5 energies collecting to a group of little kids who had not even learned martial arts. Was he crazy? Some of the martial artists who came from major powers were sneering in their hearts. Previously, they had heard that this Daoist priest seemed to have some capabilities. Now, it seemed like he was just a lunatic. An ordinary Daoist priest actually dared to talk about 5 energies collecting? Most likely, he had not even seen an expert who had reached the 5 energies collecting realm before. The reactions of the outside world did not affect Daoist priest Xianxia's preaching. He only said slowly, 5 energies collecting is a cultivation technique of my Daoist lineage. However, today, I will not be talking about martial arts. Instead, I will be talking about intent cultivation and the true meaning of 5 energies collecting. In the 5 energies collecting, the heart stores the spirit, the liver stores the soul, the spleen stores the intent, the lungs store the spirit, and the kidneys store the essence. At the same time, the 5 organs of the human body correspond to the 5 elements of heaven and earth. My Daoist lineage cultivates the body, but at the same time, we also cultivate the heaven and earth. For example, the heart stores the spirit. It corresponds to the southern Scarlet Emperor's fire. It is violent and intense, restless and uneasy. How should one cultivate in such a manner? It's very simple. The heart stores the spirit. You have to focus and focus your mind. Your own temperament will be like a jumping monkey. This is the heart monkey. What you have to do is to subdue it. As the saying goes, sever the heart monkey to become Wukong. This is the logic. Subdue the restless heart monkey in your heart. Then, your spirit will have roots. You will be able to soar in the universe and return to your position. The great Tao is the simplest. No matter where it is the same logic. For example, the Buddhist lineage emphasized the emptiness of the 4 elements. When mortals see the world, they tend to see the human heart as the main focus. This leads to their hearts being capricious and their thoughts wandering. But when the Buddha's heart sees the world, it is a stretch of clarity. Only then will one be able to comprehend emptiness and the meaning of Zen. Compared to my Daoist lineage, the Buddhist monks clearly prefer to be tactful. You guys better not learn from them. As he spoke slowly, he even teased the Buddhist sects, the old rivals of the Daoist sections. Instantly, the few little Daoist children broke into smiles. As for the other martial artists present, they all had different expressions. Some understood, and some felt that it was not bad. However, most of the martial artists had a look of disdain on their faces. What the hell was he talking about? Subduing the heart monkey and emptiness of the 4 elements? Did he really think that he could break through the 5 Qis toward the origin realm after subduing it? What kind of joke was this? Chu Xiu and the other 2 revealed a look of contemplation, especially Chu Xiu. He was about to break through to the 3-flower realm, so he attached great importance to the cultivation of the state of mind. Those who did not cultivate the state of mind naturally felt that what Daoist priest Xianxia said was nonsense and useless. However, for Chu Xiu, what Daoist priest Xianxia said made him feel like he was suddenly enlightened. These words were useless for cultivation itself. It could not increase one's cultivation, and it was not a way to cultivate martial arts. However, Daoist priest Xian Cheng's words seemed to have pointed out a bright path for Chu Xiu. As long as he followed this direction, the 3 flower and 5 cheese would be visible. Xia Xiaolu murmured, "This old Daoist is quite skilled. Do you guys think he really doesn't know martial arts?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I can't be sure. What he said has nothing to do with martial arts. It is just pure Daoist theory of cultivating the mind. It is normal for a person who has been immersed in Taoism for many years to be able to understand this. However, if this old Daoist really knows martial arts, then his strength will definitely be beyond our imagination." Xia Xiaolu nodded. This old Daoist's understanding of the 5 cheese toward the origin realm was dozens of times more thorough than the martial artists who had already stepped into this realm. If he really was a martial artist, then he would probably be a grandmaster who could establish his own sect. Daoist priest Xian Qing stretched his body. He had just talked about the 5 cheese toward the origin realm, and there were still 4 more that he was going to talk about. However, at this moment, a sharp female voice filled with hatred suddenly came from outside the crowd. "Chu Xiu. It's actually you." The crowd looked back and saw a skinny woman dressed in a white warrior suit. Her eyes were red as she pointed at Chu Xiu. She looked like she wanted to swallow him alive. This woman was none other than Yan Tingting of the Divine Force sect. In fact, Yan Tingting did not plan to come to this God Weapon conference. In fact, the Divine Force sect did not even plan to participate in the entire conference. After all, there were no outstanding people among the younger generation of the Divine Force sect. Even if they came, they would only embarrass themselves. Therefore, it was better not to come. However, Yan Tingting had been sulking in the Divine Force sect. Yan Huainan felt sorry for his daughter and did not want to see her sulking. Therefore, he sent her to participate in the God Weapon Conference. But in fact, she had come to the land of Eastern Qi to relax. Most importantly, Yan Huainan knew why Yan Tingting was so sulky. This time, the God Weapon Conference in Eastern Qi was attended by all the outstanding young talents of the pugilistic world. Yan Huainan did not care whether the other party was from a big sect or a common person in the pugilistic world. As long as Yan Tingting liked one, Yan Huainan would agree. Anyway, it was fine as long as she could forget about that useless Yuluchuan. Chapter 224. In fact, Yan Tingting was in a good mood on the way to Eastern Qi. After all, Yuluchuan had been dead for a long time. She also heard that Chu Xiu had been chased to Wei County by a few major forces, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. The knot in her heart was finally resolved. Therefore, after arriving at the Ji State Prefecture, Yan Tingting enjoyed herself for 2 days. Today, she saw that the weather was good, so she came to the Mirror Lake for a walk. When she saw a group of people gathered here, she came to watch the fun. However, who would have thought that she would see the person she hated so much, Chu Xiu? He was actually still alive. Yan Tingting had never seen Chu Xiu before, but she hated Chu Xiu so much. Naturally, she bought a portrait of Chu Xiu from Wind Sweeping Tower. On the contrary, Chu Xiu had never seen Yan Tingting. He had heard that the Divine Force sect had participated in hunting him down and so on. However, the Divine Force sect was just putting on an act, so Chu Xiu did not care. Now that he saw Yan Tingting's expression, Chu Xiu was dumbfounded. Who was this woman? Why did she look like she was going to swallow him? As for the others, when they saw this scene, they all smiled ambiguously. Looking at Yan Tingting's expression, they thought that Chu Xiu had played some unfaithful man's tricks and abandoned her after seducing her. That was why Yan Tingting came looking for him. However, at this time, Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Who are you? Do I know you?" Hearing this, everyone was stunned. What was going on? The woman looked like she was going to swallow him alive, but the man did not know him at all. At this time, Yan Tingting was even more furious. She hated Chu Xiu to death, but Chu Xiu did not know her at all. Was there anything more ironic than this? Bai Wuji looked at Chu Xiu with a gloating expression and said, "This is Yan Tingting from the Divine Force sect. You killed her beloved, but now she doesn't even recognize you. Isn't that a bit too much?" Hearing Bai Wuji's words, Chu Xiu finally understood that they were here because of Yu Luchuan. Although killing the Yu clan of Bailing was a crucial step for Chu Xiu to enter the Longhu leaderboard, to be honest, Chu Xiu did not really care about it. For the current Chu Xiu, he could destroy a family like the Yu clan of Bailing with a wave of his hand. Was there a need for him to remember something like this? Therefore, Chu Xiu spread out his hands and said to Yan Tingting, "Are you here to take revenge for that trash, Yu Luchuan? To be honest, I don't understand you." The dignified miss of the Divine Force sect actually fell in love with that trash, and because of that trash, you even chased after me. Is it worth it? Is the power of love so terrifying? At this time, everyone around finally understood. It was not a drama of abandonment, but rather, Chu Xiu had killed the lover of the Divine Force sect's Mississippi. She was here to take revenge. However, they also liked to watch this kind of revenge drama. At least it was more interesting than listening to the old Taoist priest Xian Chang's nonsense. When Yan Tingting heard Chu Xiu calling Yu Luchuan trash, she shouted with bloodshot eyes, "Chu Xiu! I'll kill you. I'm going to kill you." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There are many people in this world who want to kill me. It doesn't matter if you're here or not. However, does your father know that you want to kill me?" Sect Master Yan is a sensible man. If he really wanted to kill me, the Divine Force sect wouldn't have just put up a show. Yan Tingting looked at the Divine Force sect's martial artists beside her with bloodshot eyes and said with hatred, "All of you, go. Kill Chu Xiu." Yan Tingting had more than 10 Divine Force sect's martial artists with her. Most of them were at the innate stage or physical invulnerability. Only 2 old men were at the 3-flower realm. Aside from Yan Huainan, the Divine Force sect's other martial artists weren't that strong. Most of the martial artists who protected Yan Tingting were at the physical invulnerability realm and inner invulnerability realm. Martial artists of this level could keep Yan Tingting safe in Yannan. This time, because they were coming to Eastern Qi, Yan Huainan had 2 old men from the Divine Force sect protect Yan Tingting. He was afraid that something might happen to his precious daughter. The other people from the Divine Force sect wanted to make a move, but they were stopped by the 2 old men from the Divine Force sect. The 2 men asked Chu Xiu with a serious expression, "Aren't you a killer from the Blue Dragon Society? How did you become a member of the Guanzhong torture room?" It was normal for the other martial artists to not recognize the Guanzhong torture room. However, as one of the 7 sects and 8 schools, the Divine Force sect naturally recognized the symbol of the Guanzhong torture room. The Northern Yan martial artist who had seen Chu Xiu in the Dragon Gathering Pavilion a few days ago said, "How old is your information?" "This is the Guanxi Patrol Inspector of the Guanzhong torture room now." As soon as he said this, Bai Wuji immediately glared at him. "You talk too much." When the 2 old men from the Divine Force sect heard this, their expressions changed slightly. If Chu Xiu was still a small killer from the Blue Dragon Society, as long as he was not in the territory of the Heavenly Sin Division, they would still dare to make a move. The killers of the Blue Dragon Society were everywhere in the martial world. They had never heard that the Blue Dragon Society would make a big move to avenge a small killer. However, the Guanzhong torture room was different. Moreover, Chu Xiu was the patrol inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. Of course, they knew what the position of the patrol inspector was. Even in the Guanzhong torture room, the patrol inspector was the backbone of the power. If they really killed Chu Xiu here, then the Divine Force sect would definitely become the enemy of the Guanzhong torture room. Although the Guanzhong torture room had been very low-key in recent years, only moving around in the Guanzhong Pass and rarely appearing in the martial world, even in the songs of the martial world, the Guanzhong torture room did not have a place in the martial world. However, those who came from the big sects knew that the strength of the Guanzhong torture room was not inferior to some of the top sects in the martial world. At the very least, they were much stronger than the Divine Force sect. Therefore, the two old men immediately stood in front of Yan Tingting and tried to persuade her, "Miss, forget it. The dead cannot come back to life. Even if you kill Chu Xiu, Yu Luchuan will not come back to life. Look at the young talents in the God Weapon Conference. Which one of them is not stronger than Yu Luchuan? Moreover, the current Chu Xiu is not the same as before. He is the patrol inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. Once we touch him, we will become enemies with the Guanzhong torture room. At that time, it will bring great trouble to the Divine Force sect." Yan Tingting did not care about this at this time. Seeing that the people on her side did not make a move, she took out a dagger and placed it on her neck. She shouted, "Are you going to make a move or not? If you don't make a move, I will die. At that time, I want to see how you will explain to my father." Yan Tingting's action immediately frightened the warriors of the Divine Force sect. The two old men hurriedly smiled bitterly and said, "Miss, calm down. Calm down. We will make a move now." They had served Yan Tingting for so many years. In the past, when they were in the south of Yan, Yan Tingting was actually very unruly. When the young masters of the large clans offended her, Yan Tingting immediately ordered people to break their legs. If those people wanted to take revenge, then Yan Tingting would directly use her father's mode. It was because of her protective father that no one in the south of Yan dared to offend Yan Tingting. However, the problem was that Yan Tingting could only be said to be a little unruly in the past. She was not like now, actually using her own life to threaten the interests of the Divine Force sect. This was simply nonsense. However, no matter how ridiculous Yan Tingting was, they still had to make a move. Otherwise, if something really happened to this miss in their hands, they would not have an easy time either. Thinking about how much Yan Huainan treasured his daughter, these disciples of the Divine Force sect trembled. Since they did not want to die, the person who would die could only be Chu Xiu. Although this was not the south of Yan, it was also not Guanzhong. In an instant, over 10 warriors of the Divine Force sect surrounded Chu Xiu. They took out their weapons and glared at Chu Xiu fiercely. One of the elders held a long saber in his hand and stared at Chu Xiu. He said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, we do not want to be enemies with you, nor do we want to incur the wrath of the Guanzhong torture room. However, as you have seen, you have offended the miss greatly. We have no choice but to make a move. If you surrender now and let the miss feel at ease, I can still make the decision to try my best to preserve your life. When the time comes, the Guanzhong torture room will come to collect you." Chu Xiu looked straight at the elder, and his tone did not change at all. He said, "Old man, do you really think that those who can become patrol in a place like the Guanzhong torture room, which does not look at background and only looks at ability, are all idiots? How can you say such ridiculous things?" A cold look appeared in the elder's eyes as he said, "Since you do not know what is good for you, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I have something to say to you. The Divine Force sect belongs to Yan Huainan, but your lives are your own. It is not easy for an old man to live to such an old age. Wouldn't it be better to retire peacefully from the martial world and retire? Why must you meet a violent death? How inauspicious." Chu Xiu's words were very vicious, especially to a warrior who was not young anymore. It was no different from cursing the other party to die. The elder said coldly, "A violent death? I want to see today who the violent death is." Before he could finish speaking, Chu Xiu had already moved. His movement caused the weather to change. He formed a seal with one hand, and the power of the internal binding seal erupted. He could move unhindered in the heavens and earth. This was the extreme speed. The red sleeve blade was unsheathed. Before the blood-colored edge could completely shine, it was wrapped in endless black mist. Chu Xiu's blade, Chu Xiu's hand, and Chu Xiu's eyes were already filled with an extremely dense demonic aura of death. The three blades of Avicii. In the face of a warrior at the three-flower realm, Chu Xiu immediately unleashed the second of the three blades of Avicii. It was even mixed with the power of the great chaos of heaven and earth. This blade was the pinnacle of speed and power. The elder from the divine martial gate didn't even have the time to react. By the time he reacted, Chu Xiu had already appeared in front of him. The blade that was surging with demonic aura slashed down. Although the elder had also erupted with all the astral energy in his body in an attempt to raise his blade to block, he was forcibly sliced into two by the blade. His corpse fell to the ground with a loud bang, but strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out. Chapter 225. At that moment, Chu Xiu stood there with his sword in hand. The crimson blade was wrapped in black mist, and there was not even the slightest emotion in his eyes. He looked at the people from the divine martial sect as if he was looking at a group of dead people. In the past, Chu Xiu would forcibly suppress the demonic qi in his body after using the 3 cuts of a vici. However, this time, Chu Xiu did not continue to suppress the demonic qi. Instead, he allowed it to surge in his body. Looking at the people from the Divine Force sect, Chu Xiu's voice was extremely cold, without the slightest emotion. It was so stiff that it was like a mechanical puppet. I'm not good at saving people, but I'm good at killing people. Since you're all tired of living, then I'll fulfill your wish. I'll let you be the role models of loyalty to the sect. Another old man from the Divine Force sect looked at Chu Xiu and the corpse on the ground, dumbfounded. He even suspected that what he saw was an illusion. Chu Xiu was a physical invulnerability expert, but he killed a 3-flower realm martial artist with a single slash. If this kind of thing was said by someone else, others would definitely think it was nonsense. However, the result was right before their eyes. Not only could the people from the Divine Force sect not accept it, but even the other martial artists present were shocked. When Chu Xiu did not move, they all came with the mood to watch the show. However, when Chu Xiu moved, everyone's expression changed. With this kind of strength, let alone the top 20 on the Longhu leaderboard, he could probably stand shoulder to shoulder with the top 10 or even the top 5, right? Seeing this scene, everyone subconsciously retreated, opening up some distance between them. Mo Tianlin murmured, "No wonder Uncle Qi, the king of Annals consecrator, lost to him." As expected, this Chu Xiu probably has the strength to fight against the 3-flower realm. No. It should be said that he can instantly kill most 3-flower realm martial artists. Xia Xiaolu looked at Chu Xiu, raised his eyebrows, and said, "Uncle Qi, who was guarding the 7th floor of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, also lost to him?" But don't be surprised by Chu Xiu's strength. Sometimes a fight depends on the brain. This Chu Xiu's brain is not inferior to his martial arts. Do you really think he can kill those with 3-flower realm at one's prominence like killing chickens? It was just a show of strength. In terms of aura, he had already suppressed the divine martial sect. Although he was alone, his aura was stronger than the dozen people from the divine martial sect. Those people from the divine force sect have already lost their morale. Facing Chu Xiu, they are all afraid. Those who have cowardice in their hearts, no matter how strong they are, have already been defeated before the battle even started. Xia Xiaolu himself was an expert with the blade. Different from the sword, the blade was tyrannical and focused on imposing manner. Chu Xiu's blade not only made his own imposing manner stand at the peak, but it also cut off all of the opponent's imposing manner. At this time, the people from the Divine Force sect in the field were indeed as Xia Xiaolu had guessed. Under Chu Xiu's stunning and even frightening blade, their courage had been cut off, and they were afraid. This was completely different from the script they had imagined. The demonic qi around Chu Xiu had not dissipated, and he walked toward the group of people from the Divine Force sect with a terrifying demonic qi and death intent. In this world, you can't wake up a person who is pretending to be asleep, nor can you stop a person who is courting death. Originally, I didn't want to kill before the God Weapon Conference began. Since you guys are courting death, then I will fulfill your wish. It will also help my blade sharpen. Chu Xiu's voice was gloomy and cold, without the slightest emotion. At this time, his entire body was being corroded by the demonic qi of the 3 blades of Avicii, but Chu Xiu did not have the slightest intention of suppressing it. After using the 3 sabers of Avicii for such a long time, Chu Xiu was also constantly familiarizing himself with the power of this saber. He was also constantly familiarizing himself with the power of the backlash. Now, he was confident that he could suppress the backlash from the second saber. The most important thing was that when he listened to Daoist Xianxia's sermon just now, he had some enlightenment. Cutting off the inner ape to become Wukong. Now, the demonic Qi's backlash affected Chu Xiu's mind, causing his heart to be filled with hatred and demonic Qi, turning him into a demon ape. In the past, Chu Xiu's method was to use his own mental power and the inner lion's seal to forcibly destroy the power of the backlash. This ensured that he would not be affected by the power of the 3 blades of Avicii. But now, Chu Xiu had another idea. Whether it was the inner demon or the inner ape, it was something that belonged to him. Why did he have to destroy it instead of subduing it and using it for his own use? What Daoist Xianxia talked about was the 5 Qis collecting in mind, not martial arts. Therefore, it could be applied everywhere. Even though Chu Xiu had not yet reached the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm, it did not hinder Chu Xiu from comprehending and using it. Right now, Chu Xiu was doing this. He treated the demonic Qi's backlash as a part of his body. No matter how the demonic Qi affected his mind, he tried his best to empty it to the extreme. At this moment, Chu Xiu's heart was like an 8 trigrams furnace, refining his inner ape. No matter how strong the demonic Qi was, it could only be used as fuel for this 8 trigrams furnace, allowing Chu Xiu to completely subdue the inner ape. The others could not see anything from Chu Xiu's current state, but Daoist Xianxia, who was standing at the back, frowned and mumbled. He only heard it once, and he understood the principle of subduing the inner ape. This kind of comprehension is very rare among the younger generation. Unfortunately, he walked the wrong path. No, it should be said that he knew he was walking the wrong path, but he still chose to walk it. Daoist Xianxia shook his head, feeling a little conflicted. Listening to his sermon, Chu Xiu comprehended the principle, and then immediately started killing. Did this count as indirectly killing? It seemed like he had to keep a low profile in the future. He couldn't say these things in public. At this moment, Chu Xiu walked towards the people from the Divine Martial Sect. Without waiting for the people from the Divine Martial Sect to speak, he directly slashed down with his saber. The demonic Qi of the Avicii Dao's 3 sabers contained the power of the blood-refined deity shield. When the 2 of them combined, the power was extremely evil, causing the old man from the Divine Martial Sect to be extremely shocked. He turned to the few Xiantian realm martial artists and shouted, "You guys protect the young Mississippi. The rest of you, follow me." Just now, Chu Xiu's strike had gained the upper hand by a show of strength, and it had already destroyed their courage. At this moment, they were not thinking about how to kill Chu Xiu, but how to survive under Chu Xiu's blade. The old man from the Divine Martial Sect held a long spear in his hand, and a violent burst of Gang Qi erupted. He smashed it down towards Chu Xiu. Although his momentum was surging, it was suppressed by Chu Xiu. Just now, Chu Xiu had unleashed his speed and strength, as well as his own essence, Qi, and spirit to the extreme. He had gained the upper hand by making a show of strength, which was why he was able to instantly kill an unsuspecting 3-flower realm warrior. Now that they were in a real battle, Chu Xiu naturally couldn't slash the same way. However, with his current strength and foundation, it was enough to compete with ordinary 3-flower realm martial artists, especially since the old man from the Divine Martial Sect was not young anymore. He was no longer at his peak. Under this attack, the other party directly grunted and took a few steps back. At this time, several other inner and physical invulnerability realm martial artists of the Divine Martial Sect also rushed forward. Powerful Gang Qi suddenly erupted. Under the siege, there was a murderous intent coming from all directions. The demonic Qi around Chu Xiu flourished. He could still continue to suppress the power of the 3 blades of Avicii. At that moment, his whole body was soaked in demonic Qi. It was as if a demon king had descended. That pure and evil demonic Qi with monstrous hatred was probably something that even a real demonic expert would be ashamed of. The long saber slashed down, and in an instant, with Chu Xiu as the center, a magnificent saber light spilled out. There was a bright crimson in the black demonic chi. Those divine martial sect martial artists were shocked to find that their gang chi was easily torn apart like tofu in the evil and bright saber light. If Chu Xiu's red sleeve saber of the dusk drizzle was just a continuous drizzle, then now it was a torrential rainstorm. Under the siege, those inner invulnerability realm martial artists couldn't resist and were directly beheaded. As for the other physical invulnerability realm martial artists, they were not much better off. They were directly blasted away, and the weapons in their hands suddenly spat out blood. With one move, he directly broke through the siege of several people with brute force. The onlooking martial artists, especially those martial artists of the same realm as Chu Xiu, all had grave expressions. This level of gang chi was already beyond their imagination. It wasn't a matter of whether you wanted to block it or not, but whether you could block it or not. After one slash, Chu Xiu slightly frowned. The demonic chi attracted by the 3 blades of Avicii was really not that easy to subdue. Every time he used it, the demonic chi became more turbulent. In the end, the demonic chi was so strong that Chu Xiu had to use the 3 blades of Avicii. Take the young lady and escape. The old man from the divine martial sect with the spear rushed up again, but what greeted him was an overwhelming and powerful saber light. Those innate realm martial artists wanted to take Yan Tingting away, but at this time, Yan Tingting stared at Chu Xiu with bloodshot eyes. Her eyes were filled with a strong sense of unwillingness. Previously, she wanted to kill Chu Xiu, but her father didn't allow it and even grounded her. Now that she finally had a chance to take revenge, the strength that Chu Xiu displayed made her despair. Young lady, let's go. This Chu Xiu's strength is simply abnormal. Even if Martial Uncle Qiu is in the 3-flower realm, he won't be able to resist for long. The other disciples of the divine martial sect were still trying to persuade her. However, no matter what they said, Yan Tingting still didn't move. The hatred in her eyes grew stronger and stronger. Neither Chu Xiu nor Nie Donglu understood why Yan Tingting would like a good-for-nothing like Yuluchuan. After all, in their opinion, there was nothing good about Yuluchuan other than his good looks. Even if Nie Donglu claimed that he was good friends with Yuluchuan, it was only because of his status. Otherwise, how could a good-for-nothing like him be worthy of calling him brother? There were many beautiful women in the world, and there were also many handsome men. With the power of the divine martial sect, Yan Tingting's future husband would definitely be the kind of person with good looks. Unfortunately, Yan Tingting only loved Yuluchuan. It could only be said that there was no reason for love. Just like Yan Tingting now, killing Chu Xiu was not only to avenge Yuluchuan, but also to become her obsession. Chapter 226. A warrior at the 3-flower realm of converging one's essence, chi, and spirit were unified. Compared to those at the physical invulnerability realm, the most obvious difference was that their explosive power was more than a level higher. Unfortunately, even if Chu Xiu had not cultivated his essence, chi, and spirit to the level of unification, his explosive power was still astonishing. Back in the Guanzhong torture room, even Wei Hanshan, who was an inspector and was in his prime, was no match for Chu Xiu, let alone the old man from the Divine Force sect. His strength was even weaker than Wei Hanshan's. Therefore, the old man from the Divine Force sect already felt that he was no match for Chu Xiu's powerful devil chi blade aura. The old man from the Divine Force sect was fighting desperately to stop Chu Xiu so that Yan Tingting could escape. In fact, he was already prepared to die. This was Eastern Qi. Before this, they thought that no one would come to help Chu Xiu. Now that they were in a desperate situation, they realized that no one would come to help them either. Previously, when Chu Xiu killed another warrior at the 3-flower realm of converging one's essence with his blade, he had completely destroyed their courage. Even if they all attacked together, they would still be no match for Chu Xiu. Reality had proven all of this. However, even though he knew that he was courting death, the old man from the Divine Force sect did not want to escape. It was not because he was so loyal to the Divine Force sect and Yan Huainan that he could sacrifice his life for Yan Tingting. It was because his children were also cultivating in the Divine Force sect. Yan Huainan had sent him to protect his daughter precisely because he was experienced in the martial world. In the end, Yan Tingting had met with a mishap because of him. Regardless of whether it was because of him or not, he would be severely punished, and it would even implicate his descendants in the sect. Therefore, it was better to fight to the death here and let Yan Tingting escape. That way, Yan Huainan would at least remember his contribution and treat his children well. With that thought in mind, the old man from the Divine Force sect did not care about anything else. He began to burn the little blood he had left and began to fight with Chu Xiu. However, right at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly retreated. He formed a seal with one hand, and the surging devil qi was completely suppressed by him. This caused the eyes of the divine martial sect's elder to brighten. He knew that it was impossible for this secret method to maintain such a powerful force all the time. Now it seemed that the secret method's time limit was up. If it continued to be used, it might even cause a certain backlash. At this time, it was the time when Chu Xiu was at his weakest. As expected, after Chu Xiu suppressed the power of the 3 cuts of Avicenaraka in his body, his face even turned a little pale. Previously, Chu Xiu had used the 2nd cut of the 3 cuts of Avicenaraka many times. After using it, he would immediately suppress the devil qi. Therefore, apart from the first time, Chu Xiu had almost never suffered from a backlash. This time, however, Chu Xiu had endured for such a long time without suppressing the demonic aura. Instead, he had used the demonic aura to attack his enemies. Although it was very powerful, the consumption was also abnormally intense. To be precise, this was not a consumption of his true energy or inner force, but a consumption of his mind. However, in the eyes of the old man from the Divine Force sect, Chu Xiu had consumed too much energy. This was also his only chance. In an instant, a dazzling light erupted from the spear in the old man's hand. It was as scorching and resplendent as a blazing sun, but there was a trace of blood mixed within it. It was the power brought about by the burning of his vital energy. The spear was like a dragon, a rainbow piercing the sun. This spear thrust condensed the strongest power of the old man from the Divine Force sect. The burning power of vital qi even had a part of the effect of destroying the devil. Although it was not as good as a Buddhist cultivation method, it could still restrain a martial artist like Chu Xiu who had cultivated in devil arts. However, at this time, Chu Xiu, who bore the brunt of the attack, revealed a mocking smile. When the Divine Force sect's old man's spear fell, Chu Xiu's hand formed the great Vajra will seal. The Buddha's light that bloomed was even more dazzling than the old man's spear. Who said that he only knew devil arts? This old man from the Divine Force sect probably didn't even have basic information about him before coming to seek revenge. Wasn't he just courting death? Under the powerful great Vajra will seal, the sound of shattering astral energy rang out. The spear in the old man's hand was also a 4th revolution precious weapon. However, it was directly shattered by Chu Xiu's great Vajra will seal. The old man from the Divine Force sect was also sent flying more than 10 steps by Chu Xiu. In the end, he couldn't hold on any longer. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face turned deathly pale. Before, Chu Xiu's pale face was only because he had consumed too much of his vital qi. Now, the Divine Force sect's old man's face was pale because he was about to run out of energy. Miss. Hurry up and leave. The old man from the Divine Force sect looked at Yan Tingting, who still hadn't left. His eyes were filled with despair, but he couldn't persuade Yan Tingting anymore. His desperate attack had been broken by Chu Xiu, and he was severely injured by the great Vajra will seal. At his age, he couldn't hold on any longer. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man from the Divine Force sect fell to the ground with a loud thud. The crowd immediately went into an uproar. 2 3-flower realm warriors, as well as several inner and outer invulnerability realm warriors, were killed and seriously injured by Chu Xiu in the blink of an eye. They couldn't even find a word to describe his strength other than terrifying. Meanwhile, in the field, after dealing with the 2-3 Flower Realm warriors, Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and revealed a hint of murderous intent as he walked toward Yan Tingting. In fact, Chu Xiu didn't like to kill women. After all, he was a man, and it was somewhat degrading for him to always kill women. However, the premise was that the other party didn't provoke him and didn't affect his interests. Otherwise, if Chu Xiu wanted to kill them, he wouldn't care about men or women. He only cared about the living and the dead. He killed Yu Luchuan. It didn't matter if Yan Tingting hated him or resented him. However, she now hated Chu Xiu to the extreme. As long as there was a chance, Chu Xiu was sure that this woman would definitely kill him. Therefore, if he let her live, countless troubles would be waiting for Chu Xiu. It was better to kill her now and put an end to it. As for the Divine Force sect, Chu Xiu really didn't believe that Yan Huainan would dare to go to the Guanzhong torture room and ask for Guan Siyu. Whether it was in terms of status or strength, the Guanzhong torture room far surpassed the Divine Force sect. Most importantly, this was the style of the Guanzhong torture room. If you don't provoke me, I won't provoke you. The Guanzhong torture room never took the initiative to cause trouble, but they were never afraid of it. The few innate stage warriors guarding in front of Yan Tingting saw Chu Xiu walking over. They weren't as useless as running away in fear, but they still said in a slightly trembling voice, "Don't come over." "Chu Xiu, are you crazy? Do you know that if you kill the young lady, you will never rest until the Divine Force sect is dead?" Chu Xiu held his saber and said indifferently, "Not rest until the Divine Force sect is dead? If I don't kill her, she will definitely continue to create all kinds of trouble to deal with me. At that time, the Divine Force sect and I will also not rest until the Divine Force sect is dead. Therefore, why don't I finish her off earlier? So, please go to hell." However, at this moment, Yan Tingting suddenly raised her head and shouted to the surrounding warriors who were watching the show, "I will marry whoever kills him." As soon as she said this, everyone present was in an uproar. This young lady of the Divine Force sect was probably mad with anger. How could she say such words? However, Yan Tingting said with hatred in her hoarse voice, "I swear by the Divine Force sect's fortune that if anyone can kill Chu Xiu, I will marry him today. Everyone here can be a witness." Hearing Yan Tingting use the Divine Force sect to swear, everyone present couldn't help but change their expressions. What Yan Tingting said should be true. Her reputation wasn't worth much, but the Divine Force sect was one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. As Yan Huainan's daughter, she used the Divine Force sect's fortune to swear. This couldn't be false. Hearing this, there were many people who were tempted. Although they knew that Yan Tingting was using her marriage as the price to kill Chu Xiu purely out of hatred, they didn't like Yan Tingting because of love or anything like that, but because of Yan Tingting's identity. She was the young lady of the Divine Force sect. Moreover, Yan Tingting's appearance wasn't bad. Those disciples of the big sects might not like her, but some rogue cultivators or warriors from small sects were tempted. However, although they were tempted, no one made a move. It wasn't that Yan Tingting wasn't attractive enough, but Chu Xiu's power just now was too shocking, and it scared them. He had killed 2-3 Flower Realm martial artists in a row. Even if they were old, they were still genuine 3 Flower Realm martial artists. Moreover, the other inner and physical invulnerability realm martial artists were no match for him. Becoming the son-in-law of the Divine Force sect was very attractive, but the premise was that one had to weigh one's capabilities. Seeing that everyone present was scared by Chu Xiu's power and didn't dare to make a move, Yan Tingting shouted at them, "What are you afraid of? No matter how strong Chu Xiu is, he is only in the physical invulnerability realm. Look at his face. Just now, the people of the Divine Force sect used up most of his inner force. There are so many of you, and you still don't dare to make a move?" Seeing that everyone was still hesitating, Yan Tingting gritted her teeth and said, "I'm my father's only daughter, and the Divine Force sect doesn't have any outstanding disciples in this generation. Whoever marries me will receive all the resources and support of the Divine Force sect, and he will be the next sect master of the Divine Force sect." As soon as these words came out, the innate realm warriors who were protecting Yan Tingting were shocked. The young lady had gone crazy. For the sake of revenge, she didn't care about anything else. How could she make such a promise? Although Yan Huainan's words carried weight in the Divine Force sect, the Divine Force sect was still a sect, not an aristocratic family. The next sect master looked at strength, not relationship with Yan Huainan. Now that Yan Tingting made such a promise here, if word got back to the Divine Force sect, most of the disciples in the Divine Force sect would be dissatisfied. It might even cause unrest in the sect. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.